Arkle's citadel shook like a living beast as scarlet sirens howled, and the sky split open above. Stone towers flared with burning talismans, runes flinging red light across armor and bare feet. Trainees spilled from barracks in half-buttoned uniforms, weapons clattering, curses sharp and wild. Cairo jolted awake to the sight of his ceiling glowing with veins of impossible blue lightning arcs. For 3 stunned heartbeats, he forgot his own name. Then the mark over his heart burned awake. A pale circle of light pressed against his skin from inside, pulsing faster than his racing breath. The air in the dorm was thick with smoke-scented mana, metallic and hot against his dry throat. Outside his door, bodies crashed past, boots slamming stone, voices tangling in panic and training. Someone hammered on his door hard enough to rattle dust from the warped wooden frame immediately. Cairo, move that useless carcass, the gate is screaming. We are already late to die brilliantly. He rolled from the bunk, snatching his black jacket from the peg, fingers brushing the burning mark. Beneath skin and bone, the faint circular sigil spun slowly, dull silver lines refusing to sharpen. 3 years since his gift awakening. 3 years of instructors squinting and shrugging at his chest. Blazing sword glyphs, roaring elemental beasts, shadow crowns, all called applause for others easily. Cairo had received a trembling circle no one could read, stamped his faulted sigil in bitter ink. He yanked the door open and nearly took a spear shaft between the eyes from his furious friend. Lena yanked the spear back with reflexive grace, braid whipping like a black banner behind her. You were actually asleep, she snapped, eyes wide and bright, while the sky tried to kill us. If the world ends quietly, I want to miss the performance, he said, forcing a crooked grin quickly. Lena jabbed a finger against his chest, right where the mark simmered like an embarrassed ember. That thing glowed through your shirt from the hallway. Liar, she said. You woke up before I knocked. The corridor beyond them flickered red as talisman strips snapped to full life along damp stone walls. Trainees surged in organized chaos, forming half-perfect lines that broke whenever fear bit ankles. At the far end, a man in scored black armor stood like a blade-driven point first into shifting sand. Captain Rail's 4 golden sigils hovered above his breastplate, steady suns in a storm of confusion. First and second years to the inner plaza. Formation Delta, he roared, voice cutting through sirens. Third years and veterans. Armed deployment to the northern rampart. Veil breach priority immediate. Cairo and Lena exchanged one look, then glanced at the black bands sewn into their sleeves grimly. North again, Lena muttered, already jogging, spear cap knocking against her shoulder in short bursts. If the gate hates one direction, it is definitely ours, Cairo replied, falling into step beside her. They plunged down spiral stairs slick with condensation, past arrow slits showing the broken sky reeling. Beyond the walls, Arkle's river shimmered an unhealthy violet, reflecting fractures in the clouds. Lanterns along the lower streets flickered, as if arguing with shadows trying to swallow their wicks. They burst into the armory, a cavern of steel and glyphs where weapons waited like patient ghosts. Racks of blades hummed softly, glyphs hovering above each steel curve like restless guardian spirits. Lena ripped open her spear case, revealing a long ash spear veined with storm-etched sigil grooves. The weapon recognized her touch instantly, glyph flaring in jagged lines of white across the shaft. Tempest Lance, reporting for overtime, she said, spinning it once, lightning crackling along steel. Cairo ignored the singing swords that had never warmed to his grip and headed for the rejects alcove. There, among failed constructs and experimental scraps, lay his assigned focus, unremarkable and plain. A simple iron bracer rested on dark cloth, lined with dull crystal shards that never glowed for tests. No glyph sparked when his fingers closed around it, yet the bracer thrummed faintly with his heartbeat. Whenever his mark twitched, the metal answered in soft vibrations, like a whisper pressed into bone. He strapped it to his forearm, flexing his hand, feeling oddly complete and entirely unprepared again. Captain Rail strode into the armory, cloak trailing streaks of dying talisman fire behind armored heels. His golden sigils floated brighter now, each a different shape, each feeding the next with hungry light. Listen, he called, and the room obeyed. Fear clustering in throats but not daring to speak yet. The Eidolon gate has misaligned and opened a vertical fracture directly above our outer ring now. Murmurs exploded because the gate belonged to the distant canyon, not the air over their heads. Rael continued without softening. Veil-born fragments are falling in scattered clusters across Arkle. High Arcanists are sealing the main tear, he said. We hold the northern rampart or we lose everything. Cairo's mark burned hotter, a tight coil of heat under his ribs that made him swallow back a curse. Rael's gaze swept the trainees and stopped, sharp as a hooked knife, when it landed on Cairo finally. Faulted sigil, Rael said, ignoring the wince the title pulled across Cairo's features instantly. You are front line with Lena, directly under my field sight. No more hiding at the back of formations. A ripple of mocking laughter ran through some trainees, quickly smothered by Rael's turning glare. If that unknown gift ever had purpose, he said, tonight is when we learn it, one way or another. Cairo's throat went dry, but he stepped forward, boots heavy, trying to match Rael's unblinking stare. Understood, Captain, he answered, though he understood almost nothing and feared nearly everything. Lena bunked his shoulder hard enough to jolt his balance, grin fierce despite tension in her jawline. Look at that, she said. Your defective brand just got promoted to mystery weapon of Arkle Citadel. If I explode, Cairo muttered, make sure they write something stylish on the crater, please. They poured from the armory into the open, rain of fractured light falling from the wounded sky above. Jagged rifts of luminous purple slashed the clouds, bleeding fragments that hissed as they descended. Each falling shard left a trailing echo, a dark smear like oil dragged across glass by unseen fingers. They sprinted along the walkway toward the northern rampart, wind clawing at their cloaks relentlessly. Below, families were being shepherded from the lower terraces, faces pale under lantern glow. Children clutched talisman beads, eyes wide, while elders muttered half-forgotten protective rhymes. The northern rampart was already a storm of movement, wardens locking shields, archers stringing bows. Defensive pylons lined the wall, their crystals flickering as Veil energy gnawed at warding arrays. A shard slammed into the stone just beyond the parapet, splintering into spreading ink-black puddles. From that spreading stain, something unfolded, tall and jointed wrong, as if it had misread anatomy badly. It rose on two long limbs, skin like stretched shadow, had a smooth curve with shifting white slits. Lena set her spear, stance low, teeth bared. Veilborn Type 2, she said, fast, slicing, viciously playful. Cairo felt the mark hammer inside his chest, not in fear, but in recognition, like an alarmed heartbeat. The iron bracer rang once, a tiny chime only he seemed to hear, as if a bell tolling underwater softly. Shields up! Rael shouted, charging to the front line, golden sigils blazing like miniature suns. First rank brace, second rank strike through gaps, third rank guard civilians behind the inner stairs. The Veilborn shrieked, sound scraping across stone and bone like rusted nails on glass, cracking courage. A trainee to Cairo's left flinched, shield dropping a fraction, enough for shadow claws to slash past. Rael was there instantly, blade of pure golden light unfolding from his nearest sigil in a searing arc. He cleaved through the creature's reaching limb, severing it in a burst of hissing, dissolving black mist. The severed part splattered across the rampart floor and tried to crawl, dragging itself towards screams. Cairo stepped instinctively between it and a cluster of terrified civilians huddled behind broken crenels. The crawling limb flung spines of shadow toward his eyes, movement faster than thought, sharper than lies. His mark flared white-hot, ripping a gasp from him as the bracer snapped cold against his bones abruptly. A circle of pale light traced itself around his boots, thin as chalk at first, then thickening with resolve. Lines climbed upward from the circle, forming a cage of silver bars that rose faster than the shadow leapt. The limbs slammed into the forming barrier, splattering, then reforming as the bars locked around it. Everyone near him froze, even mid-swing, as the tiny cage blazed bright, runes spinning along its arcs. The trapped shadow thrashed, spines ricocheting harmlessly inside, each impact feeding the glow brighter. Cairo stared, chest heaving, mind racing to catch up with what his body and mark had just performed. Lena's shout snapped the moment. Cairo, move, she yelled. The big one is still very alive and offended. The main Veilborn hurled itself at the shield line, claws screeching across reinforced plates like saws. Archers released a volley of spirit arrows, shafts trailing pale blue, sinking into shadow flesh and crackling. The creature staggered but did not fall, its body fracturing into thinner strands that whipped through gaps. Cairo felt every motion, like invisible threads tugging on his mark, urging him to shape more cages. He slammed his fist, bracer first, into the rampart stone, teeth rattling as silver surged from the contact. A second circle sprang up beneath the Veilborn, runes flaring, bars firing upward in a lattice of light. Shadow limbs sliced at the forming prison, but each cut only split the bars into more lines, doubling strength. With a final metallic snap of magical tension, the cage sealed, compressing the creature into writhing limits. For a heartbeat, the entire rampart went silent, even the siren seeming to draw breath in stunned awe. Rael turned slowly, golden eyes reflecting the silver cage as if seeing a long-lost weapon reborn anew. Containment, he said softly. The word more diagnosis than praise, more revelation than simple victory. Faulted sigil? My boots, Lena breathed, eyes wide. You were hiding a whole prison inside your ribs. Cairo wanted to answer with a joke, but the mark roared again, drowning humor in cold, sharp awareness. More shards fell from the ruptured sky, slamming into rooftops beyond, blooming into smaller Veilborn. On the rampart, the trapped creature melted, its essence pouring into the cage like ink down glass walls. The runes along the bars shifted, becoming more complex, reacting to the foreign pressure coiled inside. Cairo felt it all, as if he were holding the bars with bare hands, every impact rattling his bones deeply. Do not overextend, Rael snapped, stepping closer, golden sigil sending stabilizing pulses toward the cage. You hold, we strike, he said. That is the division, unless you want to join the gate on the other side. I am trying very hard not to move anywhere, Cairo replied through clenched teeth. Vision haloed white, Lena swept past him, Tempest lance blazing, skewering a newly formed Veilborn climbing the outer wall. Lightning burst from her spear point, shredding the creature into sizzling threads that evaporated on wind. Cairo staggered as 3 of those threads snapped toward him, drawn to his cage like iron filings to lodestone. The bracer drank them, silver circle brightening in a painful surge, caged Veilborn shrieking without sound. He saw something then, not with eyes, but with the mark, a glimpse beyond the tiny prison anchored here. Endless darkness stretched, not empty, but filled with distant shapes wrapped in binding rings of light. The cages floated in that void, some small, some vast, all humming with the same pattern around his heart. One titanic shape shifted behind them, pressing closer. Curiosity, a pressure heavier than mountains. Not hatred, not kindness, just interest, so intense it made his lungs forget how to work for one heartbeat. Cairo, Lena called, voice distant. Stay with me. Do not let whatever that is into your skull. He dragged air back into his chest and forced his focus onto the here, the now, the stone under boots. The vision snapped, leaving behind a ringing emptiness and the impression of eyes closing far away. The silver cage blazed high once, then settled into a steady glow. Veilborn fragments frozen in place. Around them, the remaining creatures were being pushed back, golden light and storm steel carving space. Siren shifted tone, moving from chaos alarm to contained breach, still urgent but less desperate. Rael planted his sword tip into the stone, golden sigils dimming to controlled, cautious embers. Report, he called, voice carrying along the rampart. Wounded forward, casualties marked, hold line. Trainees began counting, dragging the fallen back, binding wounds, reloading crossbows with shaking hands. Lena wiped veil residue from her spear with quick, angry motions, then turned squarely toward Cairo. Since when, she demanded, could you turn nightmares into furniture with glowing bars? Since always, apparently, Cairo said, sagging against the parapet, legs trembling like soaked ropes. I thought the mark was broken, he added. Maybe it was just stubborn about showing the right trick. Rael approached, studying the cage with the measured caution of a man who has seen miracles backfire. Containment type. Gifts are almost myths, he said. Most exist only in records older than this citadel. He reached out, not touching the bars but hovering a hand nearby, golden sigils reacting in wary harmony. This is not a simple prison, Rael continued. This is a bridge that refuses to let things cross freely. Which means the council will want it, he said, eyes shifting to Cairo, and will not ask politely first. Cairo gave a tired half-laugh. Fantastic, he replied. I always wanted to be popular for terrifying reasons. Lena stepped between them instinctively, spear butt thudding against stone beside Cairo's boot firmly. Anyone who tries to crack his chest open gets the spear first, she said, voice low and absolutely sincere. Rael's mouth twitched, almost a smile, quickly buried under command severity that refused to relax fully. "No one dissects trainees under my command," he said. "Not while they still breathe and answer orders." He glanced at the cage, then at Cairo again. "Can you release it safely?" he asked, "or does it release you?" Cairo swallowed around the dryness in his throat, staring at the trapped Veilborn straining against bars. He did not want to feel it escape and rush back to the gate, carrying knowledge of his shape with it. The mark answered before he chose, flaring once, sending a soft ripple through the cage like a sigh. The bars contracted, compressing the shadow further, runes spinning faster until light beard edges. With a sound like glass collapsing inward, the entire construct imploded into a single spark of dark. That spark winked out, leaving only faint scorch marks on the stone where the circle had been etched. Cairo sagged fully now, knees threatening to fold, but Lena's arm hooked under his before he dropped. "Still here," she said. "Still mine to complain about? Good. I did not want to shop for a new idiot. Next idiot might come with a useful gift from the start," Cairo muttered, eyes closing briefly. Rael looked toward the sky, where the fractures were slowly knitting, purple wounds fading to bruised gray. Distant bells rang from the central spire, deep and resonant, signal of primary stabilization at last. The air cooled with each toll, veil pressure receding, ward pylons along the walls returning to steady lamplight. On the rampart, exhausted cheers rose in broken waves, relief mixing with grief for those who did not stand. Rael's expression remained grave. "This was only a fragment fall," he said quietly, more to himself. "If the gate ever fully opens above us, containment will be the only line between Arkle and erasure." Cairo heard him, the words settling heavy inside, heavier even than the memory of cages in the void. The mark pulsed once in answer, not panicked, not calm, simply acknowledging the weight of the thought. "I am not a wall," Cairo said, voice hoarse. "I am barely a doorstop that learned one trick tonight." Lena squeezed his arm. "Then we stack more doorstops," she said, "until the gate trips on all of us." Rael actually laughed, a short, rough sound, quickly drowned by renewed commands and movement. "Inner plaza debrief in 1 hour," he announced, voice booming across stone. "Medical checks mandatory. Anyone who faints on the way will be dragged by their boots and filed as ongoing training failure." Lena snorted. "You heard the man," she told Cairo. "No fainting, at least not where he can see you." As they turned from the rampart, Cairo glanced back at the sky, now only crackled with distant thunder. For a heartbeat, he imagined he saw faint silver bars reflected in the clouds, forming a ring around Arkle. Behind those imagined bars, something vast shifted again, not closer, not farther, simply more aware. His mark warmed like a quiet warning and a quiet promise, tangled into one impossible heartbeat. Cairo squared his shoulders, leaning on Lena just enough to walk, not enough to be carried completely. Whatever waited beyond the gate had noticed him now, and the world would never be simple again. But as long as this citadel stood, as long as friends dragged him forward, his cages would not belong to fear. Chapter 2. Echoes Under Iron. Skies begins with rain drumming on the citadel roof like impatient fists. Gray light seeps through narrow windows, painting the barracks in tired silver and bruised shadow stripes. Cairo lies awake on his bunk, boots still on, staring at the rafters as if answers hide between planks. Every time he closes his eyes, he feels the cages again, light bars humming against Veilborn's shrieks. His mark has stopped burning, yet a dull ache lingers beneath his ribs like bruised lightning at rest. Around him, other trainees snore, mutter, or stare at nothing, pretending sleep in the cold pre-dawn gloom. Lena sits cross-legged on the neighboring bunk, spear across her lap, polishing it with obsessive focus. "You blinked like someone stabbed your thoughts again," she says, not looking up from the spearhead. Cairo exhales slowly. "I see things when it gets quiet," he says, "like the cages remembered I borrowed them." "Do they want them back?" Lena asks, finally glancing over, eyes clear despite the dark rings beneath. He almost laughs. "If they do, they can apply through Captain Rael and wait for an appointment list." A bell tolls faintly above them, not alarm, but the low 3-note call of formal summons from command. Lena groans. "Perfect," she mutters. "No one rings that pattern unless someone important is irritated." Boots thump the corridor, a messenger calling names, voice cutting through the barracks like a thin blade. "Third-year trainee, Cairo," the voice calls. "Third-year trainee Lena, report to Captain Rael immediately." Several heads pop up from bunks, eyes wide, whispers forming faster than steam over poured boiling water. "Look at that," someone says. "The faulted sigil gets dragged to the tower before breakfast again. Maybe this time they upgrade him to officially cursed sigil." Another mutters, half nervous, half cruel. Lena swings off her bunk, landing with a thud that makes the floor complain, and the comments die abruptly. She shoulders her spear and glares down the aisle. "Talk quieter," she says, "or I practice aim on tongues." Cairo rises more slowly, adjusting his jacket, fastening the strap over the bracer with steady fingers. The iron feels heavier today, as if last night's battle added weight that cannot be measured in metal. As they step into the corridor, the messenger warden falls into step, armor clinking like muted chimes. "Council envoys arrived before dawn," she says quietly, keeping her gaze forward with disciplined control. "Whoa! Captain Rail wants you in the inner trial tower before they grow impatient and dangerous again," Lena snorts. "Council envoys are born impatient and dangerous, standing just adds smugness to the mix." Cairo grimaces. "Do they know about the cage yet?" he asks. "Or are we the surprise centerpiece exhibit?" The warden's silence answers better than any careful sentence could. Of course, they already know everything. They cross the inner courtyard, where damp banners hang heavy, colors muted by rain and sleepless fear. Arco below looks deceptively calm, smoke rising from chimneys, vendors setting stalls in slow motions. Only the extra wardens at each gate and the humming ward pylons betray how close the world came to ripping. At the base of the inner trial tower, silver lines shimmer faintly along stone, reacting to Cairo's presence. Lena notices and elbows him. "The building likes you," she says. "You attract unsettling architecture now." Two wardens guard the door, helms etched with static wards that crackle softly in the wet morning air. One raises a hand. "Captain Rail waits inside with Council Envoy Marin," she says, voice tight and formal. "Your weapons remain," she adds, eyes flicking to Lena's spear and Cairo's bracer with grudging respect. The tower door grinds open, stone scraping stone, air spilling out thick with incense and charged mana. Inside, the spiral stair glows faintly, each step inlaid with geomantic sigils that thrum beneath their boots. Cairo's mark answers, beating in rhythm with the tower, a resonance that feels both natural and intrusive. "Relax," Lena murmurs. "If the stairs wanted to eat you, they would have done it to someone else already." "Comforting," Cairo replies. "I love living where the furniture might be older and hungrier than I am." They emerge into the circular arena chamber, open floor ringed by floating crystals and scribed iron hoops. Above, a balcony shrouded in gauze screens hides several seated figures, silhouettes carved from shadow. Captain Rail stands near the center, helm off, expression stern, golden sigils dimmed but ready to blaze. Beside him waits a man in dark green formal robes, silver chains layered across his chest like polite armor. His hair is streaked with white at the temples, his eyes bright and sharp, his smile almost genuinely warm. "Council Envoy Marin of the Inner Ring," he says, bowing shallowly, "observer and liaison for this incident." Lena bows just enough to be technically respectful. Cairo mirrors her, aware of Rail's gaze on his posture. "We appreciate your containment work last night," Marin continues. "It kept casualty reports manageable." There is approval in his tone, but also calculation, like he is measuring Cairo's weight as a tool and risk. Rail clears his throat. "The council wants to see the sigil in controlled conditions," he says bluntly. "This chamber can project gate echoes and limited veil-borne constructs housed within secure arrays. Your task," he adds, meeting Cairo's eyes, "is to repeat last night's performance without collapsing." Cairo forces his mouth not to twist. "Inspiring vote of confidence," he says. "I feel very reassured already." Marin's smile deepens a fraction. "Caution keeps cities standing," he says. "Jokes keep people in one piece." He gestures upward, and a cluster of crystals shifts, focusing pale light into the center of the arena. "The projection core will emulate a minor fracture," Marin explains. "No true gate contact, only resonance." "Theoretically," Lena mutters, under her breath enough that only Cairo and maybe Rail can hear her. Rail looks at Cairo. "You step into the circle," he says. "Lena covers your blind side. I anchor your back. If anything feels wrong beyond normal terror," Rail adds, "you shout and I end the trial immediately." Hearing that from Rael makes Cairo's shoulders loosen just slightly. This is not a council death stage. He steps into the marked center, feeling the tower's heartbeat align with his, the mark pulsing in answer. Lena moves to his right, spear held low but ready, eyes scanning the crystal arrays with predatory focus. Rael stands behind them, golden sigils glowing softly, like coiled suns waiting for an excuse to flare. Marin raises a hand. "Begin projection," he calls, and the crystals ignite, light spearing down like judgment. The floor ripples beneath Cairo's boots, the sigil pattern shifting, rearranging into circles within circles. A cool wind rises from nowhere, carrying the faint scent of the canyon where the Eidolon Gate yawns. Cairo's mark flares in recognition, a painful kind of homesickness for a place he has never willingly seen. Shadow forms coalesce at the edge of the circle. 3 veil-born silhouettes with names written in hunger. They are smaller than last night's monster, but sharper, edges defined, movements coordinated and precise. Lena lowers into stance. "I have them," she says, muscles coiling. "You focus on your glowing cage trick." Cairo lifts his bracer, fingers trembling only slightly now, mind reaching for that silver geometry again. "Contain," he whispers, and the world around him pauses for a fraction before leaping to obey his order. The circle of light flares around his feet, rising in graceful arcs, bars weaving themselves from pure intent. The 3 veil-born lunge simultaneously, testing different sides, claws seeking gaps that do not yet exist. Bars snap into place ahead of them, cages braiding into a single larger construct that traps them together. The creatures slam against the light, bodies warping, claws scraping, leaving no mark on the glowing steel. Cairo exhales slowly, feeling the tension in the bars, every impact a vibration running up his bones. Marin leans forward on the balcony, voice thoughtful. "Stability exceeds projections," he murmurs to someone. "Sigil threshold appears higher than standard mid-rank classification," he says. "Possible deep tier potential." Cairo grits his teeth. "I am standing right here," he mutters. "Please at least pretend I am not a machine." One veilborn stops thrashing and tilts its faceless head, pressing close to a bar as if sniffing the light. Cairo feels a tickle at the edge of his consciousness. A pushing, not brute force, but inquisitive persistence. He focuses, tightening mental grip on the cage, refusing to let that push become a path into his thoughts. "Not this time," he whispers. "You stay on that side and I stay very firmly on mine, thank you." The mark pulses and the bars respond, runes along them sharpening, forming narrower, finer net patterns. The veil-born hisses, the mental pressure retreating, thwarted, though the curiosity remains like a stare. Rael's voice reaches him, steady. "Breathing is allowed, trainee," he says. "Try not to outlaw it mid-trial." Cairo huffs a shaky laugh, the sound grounding him, pulling him back from the edge of obsession with control. "Increase density," Marin calls, and another crystal flares, summoning additional shadow threads into the cage. Black wisps stream in, merging with the trapped creatures, making the mass more turbulent, less defined. The cage groans, light bending, runes whirling faster, Cairo's heart matching the frantic rhythm instinctively. Lena glances at him, jaw tight. "Cairo, talk to me," she says, voice low. "Do not disappear into that glow." "I am fine," he starts, then flinches as the mark twists, correcting him with a surge that says almost loudly, "Mostly fine," he amends. 20% terrible, 60% improvising, the rest worrying about math. Something laughs at that, not aloud, but in the back of his mind, echoing against his own strained humor. It is not the veil-born he trapped. This laugh is older, slower, distant, like thunder remembered from childhood. For an instant, he sees again the endless field of cages hanging in infinite black, humming quietly in unison. One colossal silhouette moves between them, touching each cage lightly, testing the strength of its bars. It pauses near his viewpoint, as if noticing him watching, and the sense of attention slams through him. "Cairo," Lena snaps. "Breathe, now! I will hit you with the spear shaft if you drift again, I swear." He drags air into burning lungs, clutching the bracer, forcing his focus down into the circle beneath his boots. The vision shatters, leaving silver lines and writhing shadows. The tower, the rain, the familiar weight of fear. Marin's voice is tight now. "We are at the upper safe limit," he warns. "Any higher risk structural breach." Rael does not look away from Cairo. "End it," he orders, calm, decisive. "Do not hold past your threshold." Cairo nods, sweat cold on his neck, and wills the cage to contract, runes twisting into closing spirals. The bars draw inward, compressing the shadow mass, veil-born screams knifing through the air, then cutting off. Light flashes, silver blinding for a heartbeat, then vanishes, leaving nothing but faint scorch marks on stone. Cairo wavers, legs buckling, but Lena catches his shoulder, hauling him upright with ungraceful determination. "Still here," she says firmly. "Still ours, still complaining. That means success in my personal doctrine." He leans on her, chest heaving, mark flickering between warmth and chill like confused embers and ash. Above, Maren slowly releases a breath. "Containment reliable," he says. "Subject retains self during strain." "Subject has a name," Lena calls up, eyes flashing, and vein full of irritation when you forget it. A low chuckle ripples along the balcony, some of the robed silhouettes shifting in their hidden seats. Maren inclines his head. "Cairo," he corrects, tone calm. "Your performance exceeds initial council concerns. It also magnifies them," he adds, not unkindly. "Power invites opportunity, and opportunity tempts risk." Rael steps forward, placing a hand briefly on Cairo's unmarked shoulder, grounding him more than words. "This tower and my command stand between him and any reckless council curiosity," Rael says clearly. His gift serves Arkle first, not any private experiment room deep under somebody's library floor. One shadowed figure on the balcony leans forward, voice old and edged like worn steel scraping stone. "Arkle survives because we understand what we wield," it says, "not because we hide blades in barracks." Rael's jaw tightens. "Understood, counselor," he replies, "but broken tools are no use to anyone at all." Maren raises both hands slightly. "We are agreed," he says smoothly. "No unnecessary risk without command." He turns his gaze back to Cairo, assessing again, but there is something almost like respect there now. "We will need you for further diagnostics," he says. "Though not today, even cages must rest between storms. Today you eat, you breathe, you pretend to be normal for a few hours," Maren adds, surprisingly gentle. Lena arches a brow. "Do council envoys know how to pretend normal?" she asks. "Or is that advanced training?" Maren laughs softly. "Some of us remember how," he says, "before we chose to count fractures for a living." The crystals dim, the hum of the tower lessening, leaving the arena feeling suddenly very large and empty. Rael gestures toward the door. "Mess hall," he orders. "Real food, no skipping, healer checks afterwards." "I am fine," Cairo protests by reflex, then sways as the world tilts, forcing him to grab Lena more tightly. She snorts. "You just tried to sit down through solid air," she says. "You are as fine as my patience." They leave the trial chamber, the spiral stairs somehow steeper now, each step a reminder of spent strength. Halfway down, Cairo pauses at a narrow window slit, looking out over Arkle under clearing morning clouds. Smoke trails curl lazily from chimneys, markets setting up, the river flowing green-gray without violet scars. "It looks normal," he murmurs. "If you forget how close everything came to not existing last night." Lena leans beside him, shoulder bumping as lightly. "Normal is a costume," she says. "We wear it for comfort." But underneath, everyone heard those sirens, she adds. "Everyone feels the air checking for cracks now." He nods, watching a group of children chasing a stray dog, laughter bright even in the damp courtyard. "What did you see in there?" she asks quietly. "When your eyes went all far away and your knuckles went white." He hesitates, then decides honesty might be the only shield he trusts more than jokes around her. "I saw other cages," he says, "bigger than this tower, stretching into forever, all humming the same song. And something moving between them," he continues, touching each one like it was checking work it once did. Lena's fingers tighten on the spear. "Did it see you?" she asks, voice softer than he is used to hearing. He swallows. "Yes," he says, "and it did not try to push inside, it just looked like it was curious." She exhales through her teeth. "I hate that word now," she mutters. "Curiosity gets people killed slowly." They resume walking, emerging into the main hall where trainees cross paths, gossip brewing like storm clouds. Conversations hush as Cairo and Lena pass, then swell louder behind them, filled with half-guesses and rumor. "That is him," someone whispers. "The one who built a prison out of light and locked monsters into it. Faulted sigil my foot," another says. "If that is broken, I want my gift shattered the same way." Cairo's ears burn, but he keeps his gaze forward, focusing on the smell of stew wafting from the mess hall. Inside, benches creak under the weight of armored bodies and exhausted nerves, spoons clinking against bowls. He and Lena find space at the end of a table, dropping onto the bench with synchronized weary relief. Steam rises from tin bowls of thick grain stew. Smell of onions and salted meat, almost insulting in its normalcy. Lena grabs her spoon like a weapon. "Eat," she orders. "If you collapse, I refuse to carry you back uphill," he smirks faintly. "You absolutely would," he says while complaining loudly to every brick about it. "Yes," she replies, "but that does not mean I allow you to plan for it, so chew and stop thinking." He obeys, spooning stew into his mouth, warmth spreading from stomach outward, making his hands stop shaking. Across the hall, Cairo notices a group of first years watching him like he is a story come to life too soon. One brave girl in a too big uniform raises a hand halfway, then drops it, cheeks flushing at her own courage. He offers a small wave instead, awkward but sincere, and her face lights up like someone lit a lantern inside. Lena elbows him. "Look at you," she says, mysterious cage boy inspiring the next generation. "I did not sign up to be anyone's legend," Cairo mutters, staring into his stew as if answers float there. Lena shrugs. "Legends rarely sign form," she says. "They just survive interestingly in the wrong century." Before he can respond, a healer in white and gray steps up, holding a crystal tablet and a tired expression. "Trainee Cairo," she says. "You are due for a post-resonance check. Please report after you finish breakfast." "How many scans this time?" he asks. "Because yesterday my mark started to feel like a poked bruise." "Fewer needles, more questions," she replies dryly. "Council wants subjective descriptions now, unfortunately." Lena grins. "Careful," she tells the healer. "If you ask about feelings, he might start naming his cages." The healer snorts, then softens. "Eat," she says. "Then come by. We would prefer you conscious for interviews." When she leaves, Cairo leans his elbows on the table, spoon dangling from his fingers, stew forgotten. "Do you ever worry," he asks Lena quietly, "that this gift is less about protecting us and more about inviting?" She studies him for a long moment, then leans closer, eyes sharp and unwavering as always. "I worry about everything," she says, "but I choose where to aim the worry so it hurts enemies first. If your cage invites something," she continues, "then we will decide how welcome it feels at the door." A bell chimes faintly outside, signaling the start of regular training drills, the Citadel resuming routine. Nothing about today is normal, yet swords will still swing, spells will still spark, and boots will still march. Cairo finishes his stew, the taste bland but grounding, then stands as the mess hall buzzes around them. "Come on," Lena says, hopping to her feet, spear slung across her back like a stubborn extra spine. "Let them scan your mysterious ribs," she adds. "Then we go to the yard and I make you block properly." "I just caged a nightmare," he protests weakly. "Do I really need to practice blocks like a first year?" "Yes," she says without hesitation, "because if your arms fail, your cages will not matter after that." He cannot argue with that logic, simple and brutal and entirely Lena, so he nods and follows the healer. As he walks toward the infirmary, Mark beating a slow rhythm, he feels a faint echo brush the edge of thought. Not a push this time, not hungry curiosity, just a distant awareness, like someone checking a closed door gently. He focuses on his breathing, on the smell of herbs and linen ahead, on the clatter of basins and healer tools. Whatever waits in the dark can watch from afar for now. The bars hold, the city stands, and he is not alone. For today, that is enough, Cairo decides, even as he knows the next siren will demand more than cages again. Chapter 3. The river that tried to answer begins with Arkle pretending nothing has changed overnight. Sunlight punches through scattered clouds, turning last night's rain into steam that curls off rooftops slowly. Market bells ring, carts rattle, hawkers shout, all slightly louder than usual, overcompensating for fear. From the infirmary balcony, Cairo leans on the railing, watching normalcy march like a nervous parade. He wears a clean uniform, but fresh bandages show under the collar where healers traced glowing lines. The mark beneath those bandages pulses softly, less like a wound now, more like a restless heartbeat. Below, the river cuts through Arkle like a strip of polished metal, calm and deceptively ordinary. Only Cairo notices how long reflections linger on its surface, shapes drifting a breath too slowly. Lena appears at his side, balancing 2 tin cups of bitter morning brew without spilling a single drop. "You look like someone waiting for the ground to admit it is secretly water," she observes dryly. Cairo takes a cup, letting the heat numb his fingers that still remember gripping invisible bars. "The city feels like it is holding its breath," he replies, as if the next scream is already rehearsed. Lena sips, grimaces at the taste, then drinks again anyway. Because habit is stronger than comfort. Council envoys went back to glaring at papers, she says. That means trouble will arrive politely. Cairo snorts. Do you think they will give my sigil a new classification? He asks. Or a warning label? She smirks. Containment. Tier uncooperative, she says. Hazardous when provoked, annoying when ignored. Before he can answer, a warden in half-buckled armor jogs across the balcony, saluting with hurried formality. Captain Rail requests your presence at the West Gate Overlook, she says, breathing hard from the climb. Reported anomalies along the river district need immediate observation by the containment bearer. Cairo groans softly. I miss when my name was just Cairo, he mutters, and not containment bearer prototype. Lena claps him on the back. Congratulations, she says. Your problems now come with official titles. They follow the warden down spiral stairs, boots ringing, corridors buzzing with half-listened rumors, trainees stretch in courtyards, striking dummies that wear crude charcoal drawings of screaming Veilborn. Healers carry crates of potion vials, faces pale but determined, murmuring inventory numbers like spells. At the West Gate Overlook, Captain Rail stands with his helm under one arm, gaze fixed on the river below. Beside him, Envoy Marin holds a sigil slate that projects faint lines of light over the landscape. As requested, Rail says when they approach, one irritated spear and one reluctant cage. Lena salutes lazily. Both very sharp, Captain, she says, one physically, one existentially confusing. Marin flicks his fingers and the projection tightens, highlighting sections of the river in glowing arcs. We have reports of people losing time near the water, he says, tone lighter than the words deserve. Short gaps, he continues. Moments where memory blurs and their reflections do not match movements. Cairo's mark stirs, heat pricking along his ribs, as if the word reflections is a tug on distant strings. Rael nods toward the outer stairs. We will investigate quietly, he says. No sirens, no open alarms yet. If nothing is wrong, he adds, we lose an hour of patrol time. If something is wrong, we gain answers. They descend to the river district, where cobblestones gleam damp and the air smells of fish and metal. Vendors call out prices, pretending their eyes are not fixed on the stillness of the water between stalls. Children toss stones that skip once, then vanish into the surface without ripples, like swallowed worries. Cairo feels tension coil tighter with every step closer to the river, the mark humming in wary recognition. Lena walks on his right, spear capped with leather, point hidden, danger disguised as mundane luggage. See that, she murmurs, nodding toward a narrow pier where a man sits staring into the water blankly. His fishing line trails limp, forgotten, eyes unfocused, reflection beneath him moving several beats off. Marin whispers a quick note into his slate, sigils shifting, recording the dissonance with clinical precision. Rail raises a hand, halting them at the edge of the crowd, letting normal citizens mask their advance. Cairo, he says quietly, do you feel anything beyond the usual haunting existential dread? Cairo swallows. The river feels crowded, he answers, like something invisible is jostling for space. Lena wrinkles her nose. Lovely, she says. Haunted water, my favorite breakfast topic. They approach the fishermen slowly, Lena circling to the side, Rail staying back to avoid spooking. Cairo kneels near the edge of the pier, careful not to let his reflection overlap the man's in the water. Sir, he says gently, how long have you been sitting here today? Do you remember walking to this spot? The man blinks once, as if waking, then frowns at his own hands clutching the fishing rod too tightly. I came at dawn, he says, then glances at the sky where the sun sits almost overhead already. Thought I came at dawn, he corrects, voice trembling. Was sure I came at dawn, but that feels wrong. Cairo glances at the water. The man's reflection is still staring straight down, eyes vacant and unfocused. His mark flares instantly, a warning spike, as he realizes the reflection is not following the man's movement. Slowly, the reflection lifts its head and looks directly at Cairo, while the real man stares in confusion. Lena sees it too, grip tightening on her spear, jaw clenching. No sudden moves, she murmurs through teeth. Marin's slate glows brighter, capturing the anomaly, but he keeps physically still, letting Cairo lead. Cairo's bracer vibrates, faint but insistent, as if the metal can taste the wrongness seeping from the river. That is not your reflection, Cairo says softly, more to the man than to the thing beneath the water. The man shudders, pulling back, finally looking down and seeing the mismatch between him and his shadow. His breath catches in his throat, eyes widening, fingers flexing as panic threatens to spiral rapidly. Rael's voice cuts in, calm and firm. "You are safe," he says. "Step back from the edge, eyes on me now." The man obeys, stumbling into Rael's reach, who steadies him with a gloved hand and quiet authority. Freed from mirroring duty, the river reflection straightens, now unbound by the human shape entirely. It rises along the surface, a flat, humanoid silhouette made of dark water and glinting silver lines. Its head tilts, studying Cairo with the kind of deliberate curiosity that makes a spine want to run. Council was right, Marin whispers. The gate's echoes are learning to borrow our shapes. Lena steps between Cairo and the edge, spear half drawn, eyes never leaving the waterborne figure. Borrowing is a nice word, she says, stealing with extra steps, more like it. Cairo's mark beats like a drum call, urging him to form the cage, to carve structure into this wrongness. He lifts his bracer and feels the world narrow to the circle of damp stone beneath his boots only. "Contain," he says under his breath, and silver light answers, eager but waiting for his direction. The circle blooms, lines racing outward, but the river reflection moves first, stepping into the shape knowingly. It slides directly into the forming cage, as if it expected the bars and wanted to examine them up close. The cage rises, bars interlocking, runes spinning, water dripping from the trapped silhouette like forgotten rain. Instead of thrashing, the thing simply touches a bar with one flat hand, ripples spreading in slow waves. Cairo staggers as understanding not his own brushes his mind, a question formed out of angles and echoes. What are you? The pressure seems to ask. Gate, lock, or the hand that turned the first key? Lena hears nothing, but she sees Cairo's eyes unfocus, sees his jaw tighten, and moves closer immediately. "Stay here," she says sharply. "If something invites you inward, let my spear answer for both of us." Cairo forces words into his thoughts, shaping them like he shapes the cage, deliberate and unshaking. "I am the wall," he thinks back, the side that says no, the line that refuses to move further. The reflection flickers, shape blurring, as if considering this claim or laughing in quiet disagreement. Walls crack, the pressure replies. Lines blur, cages open, only patterns survive when doors rot. The mark burns, his pulse racing, yet he keeps the circle steady, refusing to let fear thin the light. "You will stay in the river," he says aloud now, voice firm. "Our side is not a path for you today." The trap shape tilts its head again, then slowly, deliberately, presses its hands against every bar. With each touch, Cairo feels a soft scrape in his mind, like someone memorizing the cadence of his defenses. Rael steps closer, golden sigils dim but ready, aura radiating the promise of immediate, lethal backlash. "End it," Rael says quietly, before it finds a door inside the cage you did not intend to build. Cairo exhales, focusing everything into a single impulse, the will to shut, to seal, to erase this question. The runes along the bars tighten their spiral, silver brightening until details wash into hard white. In a heartbeat, the reflection bursts into scatterings of dark droplets, then dissolves into ordinary ripples. The cage collapses, light streaming back into the mark, leaving the river flat and unremarkable again. Noise rushes in to fill the void. Market cries, gull shrieks, the ordinary chaos of a living district. Cairo sways, pulse pounding, and Lena catches his arm, steady as a stone column against wave assault. "Still with me?" she asks, eyes searching his face for any hint of wrongness that is not familiar. "More or less," he says, voice rough. "It asked if I was the hand that turned the first key." Marin's head snaps up sharply at that, interest and alarm colliding briefly across his controlled expression. It communicated, he says. "Not simple mimicry, not mindless hunger, but structured inquiry." Rael scowls. "I do not care if it writes poetry," he says. "If it can drag minds across the river, it dies." Marin nods reluctantly. "Agreed for now," he says, "though killing every question may cost us answers later." Lena rolls her shoulders. "Questions can wait," she says. "Keeping hearts beating cannot." Rael turns to Cairo. "Did you feel the gate behind it?" he asks. "Or was this echo acting on its own?" Cairo thinks of the presence in the void, the colossal mover between cages, the sense of distant thunder. "Smaller," he answers, "like a finger testing a door, not the whole hand breaking through." Marin taps his slate, recording that. "Then the gate is sending probes," he says. "Not yet full incursions." "Comforting," Lena mutters. We are only being gently poked by reality-biting shadows, not chewed entirely. Rael gives quick instructions to nearby wardens, ordering subtle patrol increases and extra ward checks. No public announcements yet, he says. We do not shout river ghosts until we know their numbers. He faces Cairo again, gaze weighing exhaustion against necessity with commander's ruthless arithmetic. You hold the line, Rael says, but I will not let the council grind you down to count their theories. Cairo looks past him at the now placid river, where children already dare each other to lean too far again. What if I crack? He asks quietly. What happens if the cage breaks inward instead of outward? Lena steps in front of him, planting her spear butt firmly on the wet stone between their boots. Then we build another cage around you, she says matter-of-factly, made of idiots who refuse to run. You are not alone in this, she adds, eyes fierce. No matter what stories the council writes in ink, Marin watches them. Something softer than bureaucracy flickering behind his scholar's measured gaze. Cages can be reinforced, he says, with discipline, with allies, with knowledge stripped of arrogance. You will not face this as a singular anomaly, he continues. You are now part of Arkel's primary defense. Cairo huffs a humorless laugh. That sounds suspiciously like a promotion, he says, without extra pay. Lena claps his shoulder. You get free therapy in the form of my constant yelling, she says. That is priceless. They leave the pier, Rael lingering only long enough to reassure shaken civilians with few carefully chosen words. As they climb back toward the upper rings, Cairo feels the marks settle from fire to lingering warmth. Every reflective surface they pass catches his eye, from puddles in cracked stone to polished shield backs. More than once he sees only himself, but once he swears the reflection lags a heartbeat before catching up. He notes each incident, storing them like stones in a pouch, a growing weight of evidence against peace. At the Citadel gate, a group of trainees waits, eyes wide, pretending not to have been guarding for gossip. Is it true? One blurts, then flushes, that you spoke to the river and it tried to answer in your voice. Cairo stops, thinking about how to phrase something that will not become tomorrow's most terrifying rumor. It tried to borrow our shape, he says finally, and I reminded it that Arkel does not share easily. Lena grins. Put that on a banner, she says. We can hang it over the gate and call it strategic intimidation. The trainees laugh nervously, relief chasing away some of the tension that has dogged them since the sirens. As they move on toward the inner halls, Marin falls into step beside Cairo, lowering his voice. There is something you should know, the envoy says, watching the mark's faint glow through cloth. Your sigil pattern appears in very old records, he continues, not as faulted, but as sovereign containment. Cairo stumbles. Sovereign, he echoes. That sounds like something you give to tyrants, not sleepy trainees. Marin shakes his head. It refers to independence from direct divine channels, he explains carefully. Cages built without god hands, he says. Walls mortal minds maintain without celestial permission. Lena whistles low. So you are telling me he cages things that even the gods did not plan for, she asks, Marin's lips thin. I am telling you, the gods may not be the only architects of the structures we rely on, which is why, he adds, some counselors would rather your sigil never existed than risk their diagrams. Cairo stops just inside the shadow of the inner gate, a chill crawling through him despite the rising sun. If they fear what I can do, he says, what stops them from deciding the simplest solution is removing me. Rael appears from a side passage, having clearly heard just enough to sharpen his already strict posture. My command, Rael says flatly, and the fact that dead cages help no one when the gate tests our walls. He steps closer. Golden sigils faint now, but his presence heavier than any shimmering glyph. You have power, Rael continues, and that draws both monsters and politicians like blood draws flies. You answer to me in the field, he says, and I answer to Arkel. Anyone else can send complaints in writing. Lena flashes a quick grin. I volunteer to sort complaints, she says, and stab the unhelpful ones discreetly. Marin sighs, though a corner of his mouth twitches. I see this command unit will be exhausting to manage. Rael nods once to him. Let the council know containment is active and responsive, he says. Tell them also, he adds, that Arkel will not hand its locks to anyone who treats them like disposable keys. Marin bows slightly. I will convey your exact sentiment, he replies, carefully translated into polite language. He peels away, heading toward the scrying chambers, already muttering to his slate about evolving reflection logic. Rail turns back to Cairo and Lena, the lines at the corners of his eyes deeper than they were yesterday. Rest for an hour, he orders. Then drill. Control grows through repetition, not only through emergencies. Lena salutes in a sloppy arc. You heard the captain, she tells Cairo. Nap? Then I beat footwork into you. Cairo manages a smile, though fatigue crawls through his bones like sand in old gears. Yes, spear instructor of doom, he says. I would hate to disappoint your violent schedule. As they walk toward the barracks, the mark pulses gently, like a heartbeat syncing with the citadel itself. He glances once more toward the distant glitter of the river, now hidden behind walls and rooftops. Somewhere out there, reflections are testing the memory of bars, counting lines, learning rhythms. Inside here, he is doing the same, tracing patterns in his mind, building cages that do not yet exist. The war has not burst through the gate in full yet, but it has already started in quieter places. It lives in mirrors and voices and choices made in corridors before sirens ever begin to scream. Cairo resolves that when those sirens howl again, his answer will not be just fear in a uniform. His answer will be light drawn with purpose, bars set where they must be, and friends at his side. Whatever watches from beyond the gate may learn the shape of his cage, but not the measure of his resolve. Chapter 4. The Hall That Remembers begins with thunder growling beyond Arkle's outer ring slowly. Clouds drag their bellies across the sky, heavy and low, like beasts unwilling to leave the ground. Cairo stands in the training yard, sweat cooling on his neck, wooden practice sword limp in his hand. Around him, third years hammer at dummies, boots stomping, instructors barking rhythm into their bones. Lena circles him with her spear, using a blunt practice tip, eyes bright with merciless concentration. You are thinking again, she says, feinting left, sweeping his ankles with brutal, efficient boredom. He hops back too late, stumbles, and ends up flat on the packed dirt, staring up at a gray ceiling of sky. The gate is thinking too, he mutters, groaning. I do not see anyone knocking it on its back. Lena plants the spear butt near his shoulder and leans on it, expression unimpressed, yet fiercely fond. The gate does not trip over its own feet, she says. That gives it a tactical advantage over you. He laughs despite the ache. Well, I built a cage around the river, he says. That should count as balance. Exactly, she replies, offering a hand. So stop fighting shadows in your skull and focus on my spear. He takes her hand, letting her haul him up with more force than her size should reasonably allow. The iron bracer shifts under his sleeve, cool against his wrist, Mark pulsing in time with his ragged breath. Every shout in the yard, every clash of weapon, feels like a reminder that he is not just the cage now. He still needs to be a soldier, still needs to move his own body, not just lines of light and containment. An instructor shouts for a break, and trainees sag against walls, gulping water, complaining dramatically. Lena tosses Cairo a water skin. Drink, she says, or next time I knock you down, you will stay there forever. He drinks, water tasting of iron and dust, washing away the dryness of fear clinging to his throat edges. Over the yard wall, the bell tower tolls once, then twice, then a third time with a strange hollow ring. Every head turns toward the sound. Conversations falter, practice weapons lower, silence creeping in fast. Captain Rail strides through the archway, helm under his arm, cloak damp from morning mist and duty. Envoy Marin follows, robe hems dusted with courtyard grit, sigil slate tucked under one elbow carefully. Rail's gaze sweeps the yard, landing on Cairo and Lena with the precision of a blade seeking its sheath. Containment unit, he calls, with me. The rest resume drills or argue with instructors at your peril. Groans ripple through the yard, but boots resume their patterns, routine wrapping itself around nerves again. Lena jabs Cairo lightly in the ribs. That is us, she says. Containment unit, we sound dangerously official. Officially tired, Cairo replies, but falls into step, slinging the practice sword to the rack as he passes. They join Rael and Marin near the inner gate, where wardens already wait with sigil lanterns dimmed low. Marin flicks his slate, projecting a faint map of Arkel, layered with pulsing circles of soft silver light. River echoes are quiet for now, he says, but another pattern has awakened nearer the inner ring. A point near the old temple district brightens, pulsing in time with a slow, measured, alien heartbeat. Cairo's mark answers with a faint throb, recognizing the pulse like a half-remembered distant relative. What lives there? Lena asks, squinting. Besides dust, pigeons, and bored patrols napping illegally. Rail's mouth tightens. The Hall of First Bows, he says. An old prayer hall sealed before our time. Original Covenant site with the Eidolon Gate, Marin adds, tone cautious, where the first pacts were inked. Cairo shivers. You mean the place we decided to lock up and pretend never existed until today? He asks. Precisely, Marin replies. Unfortunately, it appears that history dislikes being ignored indefinitely. Rael nods toward the gate. We move quietly, he says. No full squads, no banners, just wardens and you. If this is nothing, he adds, we keep panic asleep. If it is something, we keep it smaller than Arkle. They slip through back streets, avoiding main avenues where markets swell and gossip hunts for hooks. The temple district rises ahead, its towers shorter, stones older, carvings worn thin by centuries of rain. Lanterns here burn lower, as if out of respect or reluctance, shadows clinging to cracked pillars stubbornly. At the heart of the district stands the Hall of First Bows, its roof sagging, its great doors sealed in iron. Chains cross the entrance, each link etched with sigils that flicker weakly, as though waking from long sleep. Cairo's breath catches. The air around the hall feels dense, thick, like inhaling water instead of sky. His mark flares beneath his shirt, beating faster, responding to something older than the citadel itself. That is comforting, Lena mutters, adjusting her grip. The cursed building recognizes you immediately. Marin steps closer to the chains, fingers hovering without touching, eyes narrowed at the fading symbols. These wards were meant to keep packs quiet, he says, not to guard against active breach attempts, which means, Rael says, they were never built to withstand a gate that has started evolving its tricks. Cairo swallows. How sure are we that opening this hall is not the worst possible idea? He asks slowly. On a scale of 1 to catastrophic, Lena adds, where do we stand right now, academically speaking? Marin sighs. On that scale, he says, standing here and doing nothing may be equally catastrophic long term. Resonance will build, he explains. Pressure will find cracks. If we control the opening, we guide the flow. Rael looks at Cairo. If the hall responds to you, he says, we need to see how before it learns our schedule. Cairo steps up to the chain doors, feeling each breath drag against invisible weight pressing inward. He lays his bracered hand gently against a section of iron, careful not to brush the dim warding sigils. The mark responds instantly, warmth surging down his arm, silver threads flaring along the bracer's seams. Light races from his fingers into the chains, tracing old runes, reigniting them with reluctant fresh energy. For a moment, the hall shudders, stone groaning, as if woken from an unwanted, too deep sleep. Symbols along the doors flare in answer, recognizing the mark's pattern. Then slowly, one by one, unlock. The chains fall away with a clatter that sounds far too loud in the quiet, reverent, worried air. Lena exhales. Well, she says, either we're about to find sacred answers or extremely angry dust. Rael draws his blade, not blazing yet, but ready, golden sigils floating an arm's length above his chest. Lanterns low, he orders, shields forward. Cairo, Lena with me. Wardens hold the threshold behind. They push the doors inward. They swing with surprising ease, as if something on the other side pulled gently. Inside, the hall is vast and dim, columns rising like the trunks of petrified trees into shadowed arches. Faded murals cover the walls, depicting figures offering lights to a swirling abyss that accepts them calmly. The floor is a mosaic of circles within circles, lines radiating from a central raised dais like ripples frozen. Cairo's mark beats in perfect synchrony with that mosaic. He feels each line as if it were a nerve in his chest. Someone carved your sigil into the ground a long time ago, Lena whispers. This is older than our records. Marin moves slowly along the wall, lantern casting pale halos over cracked images of gods without faces. These are pre-codified depictions, he murmurs, before we gave names to the things beyond the gate. Rael's attention sweeps the room, lingering on the dais where a circular depression waits like an empty eye. Cairo, he says quietly, what does your mark feel when you look at that center point exactly? Cairo steps closer, each pace heavier, the air thickening around him like syrup clinging to skin. As he reaches the dais, the map inside his ribs flares, heat and cold mixing, light pressing outward. A faint circle of silver appears in the depression, matching his mark's design, but incomplete, flickering weakly. It feels like a lock that lost its key, Cairo says, voice thin. Like something was removed or never finished. Lena glances at Marin. Did someone build this hall as a cage and forget to close the door? She asks. Marin shakes his head slowly. Or they chose never to close it, he says, fearing what would wake if they did. The air hums suddenly, low and steady, the sound vibrating through stone, through teeth, through bone. Cairo staggers, catching himself on the dais edge as a pressure like deep ocean settles over his mind. In the far reaches of his awareness, cages shimmer into view again, the endless void chamber of his dreams. But this time, the view is closer, more focused, as if some great eye has leaned near the window he presents. A voice without sound reverberates through him. Not hostile, not gentle, just unavoidably immense. Builder's echo, it intones. You stand where the first promise was carved and left incomplete. Cairo grits his teeth, forcing words back along the same path, clumsy compared to that vast certainty. I am not the builder, he replies in thought. I only carry a mark I never chose to wear. The presence ripples, an impression of consideration, like waves shifting around a stubborn rock. Choice is a luxury of small spans, it says. Patterns older than memory choose you before breath. Lena steps closer, hand gripping his shoulder, grounding him, voice a tether dragging him toward now. Cairo, she says, you are looking at nothing but stone, remember? Stone and very bad interior design. He drags his eyes back to the hall, the dais, the mosaic, the columns, all suddenly too sharp and real, yet overlaid on everything he sees. Faint outlines of cages, translucent rings aligning with the floor lines. Marin watches carefully. Can you shape containment here, he asks, without an active Veilborn presence? Use the pattern, he adds. Let the hall be your frame instead of the battlefield stones outside. Rael's tone cuts in, cautious. We test small, he says. No citywide gambles inside a forgotten shrine. Cairo nods, swallowing, then lifts his bracer, focusing on the central depression, not beyond it. Contain, he whispers, and the mark responds, eager, almost relieved to finally complete a half-drawn line. Silver light spills from his chest, down his arm, through the bracer, into the etched circles under his boots. The mosaic ignites, lines of light racing outward from the dais, bars rising not from edges, but from symbols. A cage forms in the empty air above the depression, a hollow sphere of intersecting luminous rings. It hums, resonance building, harmonizing with the distant hum from the unseen void of endless cages. Then, softly, something inside the hall answers, stepping into place within that shining, empty lattice. It is not a Veilborn. It is a shape of pure light, human-sized, featureless, like a statue carved from sunrise. Lena licks her spear halfway, eyes widening. Please tell me that is one of ours, she says, and not theirs. Marin's jaw slackens, a rare crack in his composed facade. A residual vow echo, he breathes. Unbelievable! The light figure stands within the cage, hands resting on the bars from inside, posture strangely calm. When it speaks, its voice is a layered blend of many tones, old and new, male and female, all at once. We bound the gate once, it says, with light and trust and ignorance of what lay beyond the first cage. We carved this hall as a promise, it continues, that we would remember both the door and the cost. Cairo's heart hammers. You were the first, he says, the ones who built this, who bargained at the edge. The figure inclines its head. We were hands, it replies, not minds. The minds belong to those above us. Gods, Lena murmurs, expression torn between skepticism and a reluctant, creeping awe. Names were given later, the figure says, after fear needed stories more than it needed structures. Rael steps forward, blade still sheathed, respect in the careful angle of his shoulders and gaze. If this place remembers, he says, then help us strengthen what you built. The gate presses harder now. The echo pauses, light flickering, as though sifting through memories older than the stones themselves. Our bargain bound the gate to fixed thresholds, it says. Paths we could ward, chart, and bleed into ink. But the gate is not a thing, it continues. It is a behavior, a habit of reality folding around hunger. Marin swallows. Can we bind the habit, he asks, not just the doorways it chooses to open. The figure looks at Cairo now, and he feels the weight of ages settle on his unready shoulders. The sovereign containment pattern was born from that question, it says, a cage that remembers itself, not tied to God hands, it adds, not anchored to external will, but carried in the blood of mortals instead. Cairo's knees threaten to buckle. Lena's grip on his shoulder tightens, steady, unyielding, present. So I am a walking answer to a question nobody told me we asked, he says, voice close to cracking. Correction, the echo replies gently. You are the continuation of an attempt, not its conclusion. Your cage is incomplete, it says, and the gate has learned enough to test your missing lines. A chill knives through the hall. Even the lanterns seem to flicker in nervous agreement with the words. Rail's face hardens. What do we need, he asks, to finish what they started before Arkle existed? The Echo raises one hand, pressing it against the inner surface of the luminous lattice thoughtfully. 3 pillars, it says. Awareness, anchor, and refusal. You have 2, but your refusal remains untested. Cairo frowns. Awareness is my mark, he says. Anchor is Arkle, the people, the city I stand in. What does refusal mean, he asks, besides saying no louder and hoping the gate listens politely? The figure's light brightens. Refusal is choosing not to use the cage as a doorway, it says, even when begged. Especially, it emphasizes, when the begging comes in the form of lost souls and tempting bargains. Cairo thinks of the river reflections, the echoes at the outer shadow, the way they asked for names and paths. I already said no, he says quietly, to pulling them through, to letting the river become a road. The Echo inclines its head again. You said no to obvious danger, it replies. Refusal of mercy is harder. Lena's expression sharpens. Mercy, she says. What kind of mercy would require opening to that side? In crises to come, the Echo says, you will be offered chances to save a few by risking the many. You must learn when to keep the cage closed, it continues, even if it means grieving what you could not reach. Silence follows, thick as oil, heavy with futures. None of them want to imagine clearly. Marin speaks first, voice roughened. Can you help us structure new wards? He asks, using his pattern. For a breath, the Echo says, before this memory fades again into stone and forgotten vows. Place your hand, it instructs Cairo, on the bars of this model and let your mark listen without fear. Every instinct in Cairo screams against touching the cage from the inside, even a projected, symbolic one. Lena squeezes his shoulder once. We are right here, she says. If anything tries to drag you, it meets me. Rail steps nearer too, golden sigils brightening, an unspoken promise of immediate, violent interruption. Cairo draws a breath, steps up onto the dais, and reaches toward the luminous spear, hand trembling slightly. His fingers meet light that feels like cool glass and warm water, both solid and flowing at once. The mark detonates in sensation, not pain, but a flood of images and patterns racing through his mind. He sees wards redrawn, not as static lines on stone, but as living flows anchored to hearts and choices. The city itself becomes a cage, streets as lines, plazas as nodes, people as moving locks constantly aligning. He sees himself at the center, not above them, but woven among them, one heartbeat in a vast, pulsing web. Then the vision shifts, showing failure. A single act of desperate mercy opening a narrow gate through his ribs. Veilborn pouring through that crack. Reflections grabbing hands, dragging screaming faces into mirrored dark. Arkle burning, drowning, fracturing. Each image a knife driven into the idea of compromise without caution. He rips his hand back with a choked sound, sweat cold, breath ragged, stomach lurching at the images. Lena is instantly there, pulling him off the dais, putting herself between him and the shimmering sphere. Enough, she snaps at the Echo. If your history lesson kills him, your cause will not gain many fans. The light figure dims. He needed to see the cost, it says, but the thread has been passed, it is done. Already its outline phrase, fragments drifting away like motes of sunlight breaking off and dissolving. We remember, it says, voice softer now. You must remember too, even when offers sound like miracles. Finish the cage, it murmurs, and do not let gods or gate convince you it belongs to them alone. With that, the figure collapses into a spray of light that sinks into the mosaic, lines burning brighter briefly. Then even that glow fades, leaving only cracked stone and the faint echo of humming in Cairo's bones. Marin exhales shakily. Well, he says, I have a lifetime of theory to rewrite and very little patience left. Rael looks at Cairo, eyes weighing the new burden that just dropped onto an already overfull pair of shoulders. You saw it, Rael says, not a question, the way the wards could weave through Arkle, anchored to people. Cairo nods, swallowing hard. I think, he says slowly, I can help redraw the city's defenses from inside. But it will tie the cage more tightly to me, he adds, and to every choice I make while holding it. Lena's hand finds his again, fingers rough, grip warm, not gentle but undeniably steady. Then we help you make those choices, she says, or we knock you out if you decide to be heroic and stupid. Marin manages a ghost of a smile. I will draft new ward schematics, he says. You two can test survival. Rail smirks faintly. Council will scream, he says, about sacrilege and protocol and territorial wards. Let them, he adds. I answer to the city that bleeds, not the chairs that complain about ink usage. They leave the hall slowly, stepping back into air that feels thinner, lighter, yet buzzing with possibility. As the heavy doors close, the chains leap back into place, runes flaring briefly with fresh, renewed strength. Cairo's mark settles into a steady thrum. Not calm exactly, but resolved, like a drumbeat before a march. The cages in his mind feel closer now, less like foreign architecture, more like blueprints he understands. Outside, thunder rumbles distant approval or warning. It is hard to tell which in a world built on bargains. Lena bumps his shoulder as they head toward the inner ring, city noise rising to meet them like a wave. Congratulations, she says. You are officially part of the Foundation now. Try not to crack under pressure. He laughs weakly. If I do, he says, make sure they write something heroic on the rubble at least. I will, she replies, but only if you promise to make it difficult for anyone to build a new cage without you. Cairo glances back once at the silent hall, now just another old building in a city full of tired stones. He knows better now, walls remember, doors listen, and some promises never stop echoing under dust. The war has not yet broken fully through the gate, but the battlefield is already being drawn under his feet, and as he walks beside Lena and Rael, feeling Arkel's heartbeat brush his mark, he chooses his refusal quietly. This cage will not open for false miracles, no matter how loudly desperation pounds on the other side. Chapter 5. The city learns its lines begins with chalk dust hanging in the air like faded ghosts. Arkel's inner walls are stripped bare in places, old sigils scraped away, stone waiting for new scars. Cairo stands on a scaffold, bracer gleaming faintly, fingertip tracing glowing lines across rough rock. Where he draws, silver wards sink into the stone, curving in circles that echo the Hall of First Vows. Below, Envoy Marin squints at a slate, copying patterns, muttering to himself about impossible symmetry. Lena lounges against a support beam, spear across her knees, pretending not to watch every wobbling step. Do not fall, she calls. If you crack your skull, the council will staple parchment to your corpse. Cairo snorts, focusing on a tight curve that wants to wobble whenever his attention drifts toward jokes. Relax, he says. If I fall, my sovereign containment pattern will catch my face in a dignified cage. Marin glances up. Please do not test that hypothesis, he says. Our insurance forms lack that category. The new ward ring glows once, then settles, silver threads connecting to others traced along the corridor. A faint hum follows, not loud, but unmistakable, like a city clearing its throat to try a different song. This section is complete, Marin announces, tapping his slate. Inner ring quadrant 3, full resonance. Captain Rail strides into view, cloak brushing chalk dust, golden sigils dimmed to respectful background. How long until the entire inner ring hums like that, he asks, eyeing the glowing lines critically. Marin does a quick mental calculation, lips moving, fingers flicking through layers of arcane notation. At current pace, he says, 3 days, with more scribes and less council interference, perhaps 2. Lena snorts. So never, she concludes, because council interference breeds in dark corners like mold. Rail ignores the jab, gaze shifting to Cairo, assessing the tired lines under his eyes and steady hands. How does the mark feel? He asks, anchored to stone instead of just your ribs and poor life decisions. Cairo hops down from the scaffold, boots crunching chalk, mark pulsing in time with the new ward hum. It feels spread out, he answers, groping for words, like my heartbeat is echoing under every floorboard. He places his palm flat against the wall. The silver line brightens, responding like a loyal, restless dog. If something presses from outside, he says, I think I will know where first, almost before it hits here. Marin's eyes shine with genuine excitement behind the exhaustion. Distributed awareness, he mutters. A living ward network, he says, tuned through a single sovereign pattern. Gods will hate this innovation. Lena grins. Good, she says. They can file complaints after we survive their neglected mess. Riel's mouth twitches before settling back into disciplined neutrality honed by years of command. We test before we trust, he says. A small district, controlled conditions, no civilians in immediate reach. West Cistern Sector, Marin suggests, pointing on his slate. Low population, high reflection potential. Cairo's stomach tightens at the word cistern. After the river, deep water feels like inviting a repeat exam. Of course we picked the underground echo chamber full of occult puddles, he mutters. Very comforting. Lena claps his shoulder. You wanted a challenge, she says. Or did I imagine you caging rivers yesterday? Rail gestures to a pair of waiting wardens. Prepare the cistern access, he orders, and quiet the rumors. Tell no one this is a test, he adds. Only that routine checks require more boots and fewer questions. The descent into the Undercity smells of damp stone, rust, and secrets left too long in the dark. Lanterns cast thin halos along narrow stairwells, shadows clinging to each step like reluctant passengers. Cairo's mark feels the change before his eyes adjust. The hum of the new wards threads through the rock. Here and there, lines of silver glow in the walls, their rhythm matching the ones he carved above ground. It is working, Maren whispers, almost reverent. The pattern flows through different strata seamlessly, Lena sniffs. Lovely, she says. Now if only it made the air smell less like dead barrels and old socks. They emerge into the West Cistern Chamber, a broad cavern of carved stone pillars and still black water. Vaulted ceilings vanish into gloom, supported by columns veined with old warding and fresh silver arcs. The water's surface reflects the lanterns perfectly, too perfectly, a mirror waiting for a reason to misbehave. Rail raises a hand, signaling the accompanying wardens to spread out along the narrow walkway edge. No one approaches the water without my order, he says. I am short on volunteers for river haunting. Cairo steps toward a central pillar, feeling the mark tug like a compass pulled by invisible magnetic storms. The pillar bears the new pattern, etched in careful arcs, connecting to several others across the chamber. He presses his bracered hand to the rune, closing his eyes, letting his sense sink into the ward network. In his mind, the cistern unfolds as lines and nodes, silver geometry overlaying stone and whispering water. He feels each reflective surface as a potential soft spot, each ward glyph as a needle sewing reality together. Awareness, he murmurs. Anchor, he adds. Refusal, he finishes, repeating the echo's lessons silently. Marin steps closer. We will introduce a controlled veil mimic, he says. A harmless projection at first. Rail nods. If the wards react properly, he says, we will know the network can handle small shocks. If they react improperly, Lena adds, we get to hit something and then rebuild everything loudly. Marin lifts a crystal orb, its surface swirling with captured gate static, a gray fog pressed into glass. He whispers a trigger phrase. The orb cracks hairline fractures, releasing a thin ribbon of shadowed light. It snakes across the cistern, skimming the air above the water, pausing, testing the silence like a tongue. Cairo feels it the moment it touches the network, a cold fingertip on the silver lines, curious and light. The wards respond, tightening, brightening along the walls, pushing the thin ribbon into a contained arc. It flattens, becomes a patch of wrong reflection on the far wall, like a mirror painted over stone badly. Containment holding, Marin notes, scribbling on his slate. No bleed into primary structural resonance, Cairo exhales, tension easing slightly. For once, the pattern obeys the diagram instead of inventing new rules. Then the patch ripples, and something else slips through it, something that was not supposed to be invited. The cold that hits Cairo feels different, heavier, a familiar pressure from his nightmares leaning into his ribs. His mark flares, not from the shallow projection, but from something large brushing the ward network beyond. It piggybacked on the mimic, he gasps, eyes snapping open. Something rode the projection down. Rail's hand jumps to his sword hilt, golden sigils flaring a warning. Source, he snaps. Direction now! Cairo staggers toward the edge, staring at the water, where the reflections have begun to split and drift. The lantern light ripples in patterns that do not match any motion above, like someone else is breathing below. From the center of the cistern, circles of faint light bloom on the surface, mirroring his own ward design. They found your lines, Lena whispers, spear coming free of its leather cover with a steely hiss. Marin curses under his breath. The network made us visible, he says. A structure cannot hide forever. The water bulges upward without splashing, forming a dome of liquid shot through with silver streaks. Inside that dome, a shape forms, not humanoid, not beast, more like a knot of mirrored angles twisting slowly. Cairo hears the presence before he sees it fully, its mental voice sliding along the new wards like fingers. You learn to sing. it observes, impression thick with distant amusement. And you sang loud enough. Lena glances between Cairo and the dome. Is that the big one? She asks. The thing between all cages. Close, Cairo says hoarsely. A piece of it, a deeper echo, stronger than the river reflections. The wards hum louder around them. Silver lines brighten until the chamber feels lit from the bones outward. Rail steps forward, golden sigils blazing, voice unshaken. You are not welcome here, he says to the dome. The knot rotates, facets catching lantern light, showing brief glimpses of other places smashed together. Cities inverted, seas hanging above skies, cages wrapping stars, all flickering in tiny reflections across its surface. We do not seek welcome, it replies. We seek understanding. You built new lines. We wish to see their load. Marin whispers fiercely. It is using the network as a conversation channel, he says. Not as a door yet. Keep it that way, Rael growls. Cairo, can you restrict it, limit its reach without triggering a full fight? Cairo's mark thrums, the cistern map in his mind alive with tension, nodes vibrating like plucked strings. If I tighten the wards, he says, it will feel the cage closing and push harder. If I leave them slack, it spreads. Lena steps close enough that her shoulder brushes his. Pick the option where we do not drown screaming, she says. The knot seems almost patient, as if giving them time to debate, which is a mercy and a threat simultaneously. You carry incomplete pattern, it muses. Stone whispered some of it back, but you still lack deeper refusal. Cairo's jaw clenches. We refuse you being here at all, he says. Does that count as deep enough? The presence ripples, sending a cold breeze through the chamber despite the stagnant underground air. Refusal requires sacrifice, it replies. Are you prepared to let what you love break rather than open? Images slam into his mind unbidden. Lena dragged beneath mirrored water. Arkle cracking, screams cut off. An easy answer forms in the pressure. A bargain whispered like a lover leaning in at midnight. Open a narrow gate, it suggests. Let fear and injured souls pass through you. Let us hold them instead. We can save your fragments, it says. We can store them in our cages, safe from your breaking little world. Cairo's knees almost buckle. The offer twists something inside him, mercy poisoned with convenience. He feels how simple it would be to allow one small opening to guide dying minds into that cold safety. The hall echo's warning slams back into him. Refusal of mercy will be harder than refusal of open threat. Lena grabs his arm, fingers digging in, sensing the shift even without hearing the whispered proposal. What did it say? She demands. Do not swallow it alone, Cairo. That is how heroes die, stupidly legend-shaped. He swallows hard, voice rough. It offered to keep our wounded, he says. Turn the cage into a tunnel for souls. Marin pales, knuckles whitening around the slate. That is a structural horror, he hisses. A persistent exchange. Rail's stare could cut stone. Arkle mourns its dead here, he says. We do not ship them to the gate like cargo. The knot pulses, reflections warping, pushing gently against the ward network, testing for cracks again. You lose so much, it murmurs. Pain, confusion, terror. You throw them into dirt and call it rest. We archive, it says. We preserve. Our cages do not forget names once they are written into our light. Cairo feels tears prick his eyes, unbidden, thinking of the faces he could not save on the rampart, thinking of echoes at the outer shadow, begging for names, dissolving because no one could hold them. Refusal means telling those future echoes. No, closing a door that could have caught them, if he let it. Lena's voice cuts through the fog, surprisingly gentle this time. Look at me, she says, shifting closer. He meets her gaze. There is no judgment there, only fierce, stubborn belief in something messier than perfection. We bury our dead, she says softly. We remember them in stories, in scars, in stupid jokes at wrong times. Maybe your cage could store them, she continues, but would they still be ours when we wanted to grieve? Rail nods once. Pain is part of being mortal, he says. We do not trade it away to make a neat archive. Marin exhales slowly. And any door that allows traffic one way, he adds, invites it both ways eventually. The knot waits. Patient, silence heavy, pressure building in the humming ward lines, demanding an answer. Cairo straightens, forcing his trembling legs to hold, forcing his heart to speak louder than the offer. No, he says, voice quiet but steady. This cage is not a passage. It is not a vault for your collection. It belongs to us, he continues, to living choices, to flawed grief, to messy memories we keep imperfectly. The mark flares, a blaze of heat that feels like agreement, like a door inside him slamming shut firmly. The ward network responds in kind. Silver lines tighten, their glow turning from nervous to resolute. The knot stills, reflections freezing, then slowly, unmistakably, it pulls back from the central dome. Refusal recognized, it says, tone neither pleased nor angered, just acknowledging a completed test. Your pattern stabilizes, it adds. Awareness, anchor, and refusal. The cage hums closer to finished shape. The pressure eases from the air. Cairo can breathe fully again, lungs aching as if he had been underwater. The dome collapses back into ordinary water, ripples spreading, reflections wobbling before settling. Lantern light returns to normal. No echo, no double images, no stolen timing in the mirrored surface. The ward lines dim to a steady, quiet glow, like a heartbeat that has chosen a pace and intends to keep it. Cairo sways. This time, when his legs buckle, Lena is already there, lowering him to sit on the damp stone. Still with us, she asks, voice rough. Or did the big cosmic librarian stamp you into a catalog card? He laughs weakly, even as his hands shake. Still me, he says, still messy, still refusing convenient miracles. Rael steps close, offering his flask. Cairo hesitates, then drinks, throat burning, clarity snapping back sharper. You chose correctly, Rael says. Harder than swinging a sword, but far more important for Arkel. Marin kneels on his other side, slate forgotten for once, concern overriding scholarly detachment. Did it leave anything behind, he asks. Besides philosophical threats and temptation headaches. Cairo closes his eyes for a moment, listening inward, checking the mark, the wards, the humming underfoot. No doors, he says, no secret tunnels, just awareness. It knows our pattern, but we know its bargain. Lena leans back on her hands, staring up at the dark ceiling. Good, she mutters. I like us getting smarter too. Rael turns to the wardens. We seal access points tighter than before, he orders, and expand the new wards. Let council argue in their towers, he adds. We have proof the network holds against direct negotiation. Marin nods slowly. And that our sovereign cage can refuse even the most efficient form of compassion. He grimaces. I will never enjoy writing that phrase, he says, but I understand why it must exist now. As they climb back toward the surface, the hum of the city's new lines feels different to Cairo's senses. There is confidence in it now, a subtle shift from frantic improvisation to a more deliberate, steady rhythm. He feels people moving above them, each heartbeat a small anchor point, each choice a tiny reinforcement. On the final steps, he pauses, palm against the wall, letting the mark sync with Arkel's living pulse. We did not open the door, he whispers, more to himself than anyone. We let them stay our dead, not its. Lena bumps his shoulder as they emerge into sunlight filtered through thinning clouds and city smoke. You passed your first real refusal exam, she says. No one died, nothing exploded. I am almost impressed. He grins tiredly. Give it time, he says. I am sure something will explode eventually, just to keep tradition. Rael walks ahead, already speaking to messengers, sending instructions rippling through command chains. Marin lingers for a moment beside Cairo, eyes on the newly glowing ward lines along the nearest wall. The council will demand a full report, he says. Some will say you wasted an opportunity to lessen suffering. Cairo looks at the city stretching out before them, roofs and streets and people who laugh through fear. Then they can say it, he replies, from inside their offices, very far from the cistern and that thing. This cage is ours, he adds softly. It holds what we choose, not what the gate finds efficient. Marin studies him, then nods once, a gesture that carries more weight than any stamped seal. I will write it that way, he says, perhaps with fewer insults for the gate, but the meaning will remain. As the bells mark midday, merchants shout, children run, wardens patrol, and life reasserts its stubborn rhythm. Cairo walks among it, feeling every reflective surface, every sigil line, every heartbeat brush his awareness. The war has not erupted into open streets yet, but it has already claimed territory in choices like today's. And as long as he can stand beside Lena and Rael, brace her warm, mark steady, he will keep choosing refusal. Because a cage without choice is just a prison, but a cage chosen and guarded can become a promise instead. Chapter 6. The night the wards cried out begins under a sky that refuses to fully commit to dark. Twilight hangs over Arkel like a bruise, purple and orange fading into a depthless, uncertain gray. Lanterns flicker on one by one, their light catching silver ward lines newly carved into every wall. From the high tower balcony, Cairo watches the city glow with patterns that echo inside his chest. The mark hums beneath his shirt, a slow, steady rhythm that matches the ward's distant, quiet song. It should be comforting, this sense of structure, yet he feels like a spider sitting at the web's center. Every step, every shout, every clatter of armor plucks a thread he can sense at the edge of thought. Lena leans against the railing beside him, spear-propped, hair whipping in the restless evening wind. "You keep staring like the city might grow teeth," she says. "Did the hall show you something new?" Cairo exhales, watching his breath fob faintly despite the mild air, nerves colder than the night itself. "It showed me failure," he answers, "and reminded me I am now personally allergic to convenient shortcuts." Lena snorts softly. "Good," she says. "Shortcuts usually end with someone screaming in creative ways." Bootsteps sound behind them, measured and heavy, Captain Rail's presence arriving before his voice. Golden sigils float dim at his chest, like banked coals waiting for an excuse to flare into open flame. "Status," Rail says, stepping to the balcony edge, eyes sweeping the ward lines glowing below. Cairo closes his eyes for a heartbeat, focusing inward, letting the network's murmur surround his senses. "Stable," he says. Like a net in calm water, tension is there, but nothing is pulling at the ropes. Envoy Marin emerges from the stairway, slate tucked under one arm, hair slightly more chaotic than usual. "On paper," Marin adds, "everything is calmer than yesterday, which is exactly what worries me." Lena raises an eyebrow. "You scholars are never happy," she says. "Either things explode or you sulk." Marin smiles thinly. "When the enemy adapts," he replies, "quiet stretches become suspiciously informative." Rael inclines his head. "The gate pressed once through the warded cistern," he says. "Now it recalculates. Tonight we assume nothing," he continues. Patrols double, reflective surfaces watched, no one alone. Cairo shifts, feeling the mark twitch at the word alone, as if the pattern itself resents the concept. "I can anchor awareness through the wards," he says, "but distance still matters if something pushes hard." Rail nods. "You stay central," he orders. "If the network screams, we move where you point first." Lena taps her spear. "I stay with him," she says. "Obviously, someone has to hit things if he falls over." Marin clears his throat. "The council has requested remote observation rights tonight," he says. Lena rolls her eyes. "Of course they have," she mutters. "Would not want to miss the apocalypse live." Rail's expression cools. "They may watch through scrying crystals," he says, "but command stays here." He turns to Cairo. "You are the cage," he says, "not the stage. Remember that when voices get loud." Cairo smirks faintly. "If they start giving helpful commentary mid-crisis," he says, "I might cage the crystals." Marin actually chuckles. "I would pay to see you contain a council meeting," he says, purely academically. A bell rings once from the tower above. Not alarm, not yet. Just the mark of official night watch beginning. Torches flare along the walls, joining the cold glow of ward lines and the warm scatter of house lanterns. Arkel looks almost peaceful, like a painting, if one ignores the extra wardens and glimmering sigil nets. Rail claps a hand on Cairo's shoulder, firm and grounding. "To the Nexus chamber," he says. "Positions now." They descend into the tower's heart, where stone corridors curve inward toward a circular central hall. Here, ward lines converge into a complex spiral etched into the floor, glowing a steady, muted silver. Crystals float at set points around the room, each linked by faint threads to the city's outer patterns. Cairo steps into the spiral's center, the mark blazing hot, then settling as if sighing into a familiar seat. He feels Arkel unfold inside his awareness, a ghost map drawn in lines of light and pulses of heartbeat. Every street becomes a pathway of sensation, every ward a knot he can tug if something strains too far. Lena positions herself at the edge of the spiral, spear grounded, eyes scanning the doorways and crystals. "If you start glowing too bright," she warns, "I am yanking you out of that circle. No arguments allowed." Marin takes station by the nearest crystal, fingers hovering for quick adjustments if resonance goes wild. Rail stands near the entrance, golden sigils dim, ready to flare into shields or blades at the first shout. "Cairo," Rail says, "speak if you feel pressure anywhere. We move on your first word, not the second." Cairo nods, swallowing, then closes his eyes, letting his breathing fall into rhythm with the ward hum. At first, all he senses is mundane life. Footsteps on cobblestones, laughter in taverns, arguments in alleys. The wards respond to these sounds like a cat's ears twitching, alert but not alarmed by familiar noise. He almost dares to believe tonight might just be tense and uneventful, a simple test of patience. Then something changes, subtle at first, like a draft slipping under a closed door in a sealed room. The hum falters for a heartbeat, then resumes, but with a discordant undertone, like a note sung off-key. "Feel that," Cairo murmurs, frowning. Sector 5, Upper River Terrace. The pattern just stumbled briefly. Marin taps his slate. "I see a spike," he says. Small, localized, gone before it could propagate. Rael nods to a warden at the door. "Signal Sector 5 patrol," he orders. Discreet check, no sirens yet. The warden salutes and bolts. Boots fading into the hallway like a stone thrown into a wider lake. Cairo keeps his focus on Sector 5, but the disturbance does not repeat, leaving nerves stretched tighter. Instead, another ripple touches the network far across the city. In the Eastern Market District, he flinches. "Now east," he says, like someone tapping different windows with the same cold finger. Lena's grip tightens on her spear, jaw bunching. "They are looking," she says, but not through one crack. Marin's eyes narrow. "Pattern scan," he says, probing for weak junctions before picking a main target. Rael's voice sharpens. "Hold," he says. "We chase ghosts if we scatter. We wait until it commits somewhere." The wards shiver again, this time in 3 places at once. A well on the south slope, a tower roof, a plaza. Cairo's breath comes faster. "It is testing the whole web," he says, looking for a way to slip between lines. The mark burns hotter, awareness stretching thin as he tries to track every flicker without losing structure. "Do not chase every touch," Lena says firmly. "Pick the biggest shove, not the small pokes." He nods, focusing on depth rather than breadth, searching for the point where curiosity turns into intent. It comes suddenly, slamming into the network like a stone dropped into a still pond from impossibly high. Cairo gasps, spine arching as a surge of pressure hits the wards near the lower industrial terraces. "There," he chokes. "Foundry district near the old slag pits. Something is pushing hard there now." Rael is already moving. "Lena, with me," he snaps. "Marin, maintain relay. Cairo, hold the network steady. Try not to let the city fall apart while we take the scenic route," Lena adds, sprinting after Rael. Cairo forces himself deeper into the spiral lines, feeling the wards at the Foundry district strain and creak. Heat pools in that sector, even without the pressure, furnaces and molten metal leaving ghost warmth behind. The new push feels like cold poured into that heat, a clash that makes the patterns ring out in protest. He senses reflections where there should be none, mirrored surfaces in slag heaps and cooling troughs. The presence there feels different from the river echoes, more jagged, less patient, more like a blade. "It is trying to cut through," he mutters. "Not slide, this one wants to tear a chunk out, not talk first." Marin's fingers fly over the nearest crystal, sending reinforcing pulses along the linked ward threads. "Redirecting extra power to Foundry Ring," Marin says. But the strain already outpaces normal dampers. Cairo clenches his jaw, bracer thrumming so hard his hand vibrates, silver lines crawling up his forearm. "If I tighten the cage pattern there," he says, "I might lock it down before it fully punctures through." "Do it," Marin replies. "I will keep the rest of the web from unraveling while you focus on that knot." He sinks his awareness into the Foundry district fully, letting the rest of Arkhel blur into background hum. The slag pits rise around him in his mind, black lakes of cooled glass, once molten waste, now hardened. Tonight, their surfaces reflect not the stars, but serrated shapes moving beneath, like knives swimming. The pressure from beyond claws at those reflections, searching for a crack where it can hook and pull. Cairo pictures his cage pattern around that district, not as a sphere, but as nested rings hugging each site. "Contain," he whispers through clenched teeth, and silver bars spring up in his mental view, encircling pits. They do not fully close. The pressure fights back, prying gaps, pushing claws between forming lines. Pain lances through his skull, sharp as if someone hammered directly on his spine from the inside. "You do not open," he growls. "Not here, not in fire and iron, not while I can still stand upright." The mark flares so bright he imagines it must be visible through his uniform, a small sun pinned to bone. In the Nexus chamber, his body trembles, sweat beating at his hairline. fists clenched white around nothing. He dimly hears Marin cursing, crystal chimes singing as the envoy fights to keep other sectors stable. Outside, Rael and Lena reach the foundry terraces, the heat slamming into them like a half-closed oven door. Molten metal glows in channels, workers already evacuated by wardens. Slag heaps towering like dark waves. Silver lines carved recently into the foundry walls blaze, flickering as if being gnawed from the inside. There, Rael points, sword half-drawn, eyes locked on one slag pit whose surface warps like living glass. Lena grips her spear, lightning glyph twitching under the leather wrap, eager to bite something deserving. "You sure he can see us from tower distance?" she asks. "Because I would prefer not to be guessing now." Rael's sigils flare. "Trust the cage," he says. "He is holding harder than anyone else in this city tonight." At that moment, Cairo feels something slip. One of the bars in his mental cage buckles under relentless prying. A thin crack appears in the pattern, a bright, jagged gap, and through it he glimpses pure, fractured night. Not the patient presence from the cistern, not the echo from the hall, but a raw snarl of veil-born hunger. It surges toward the opening, thrilled, like water rushing through a hole in a failing dam. "Not there," Cairo snarls, shoving mentally, trying to slam bars across the gap faster than it can widen. The effort tears a cry from his throat. His knees hit the spiral center, hands slamming the glowing lines. In the foundry, the slag pit explodes upward, shards of black glass and shadow bursting into the hot air. From the spray, creatures coalesce, lean and serrated, eyes like burning cracks in stone, limbs jagged. Lena laughs once, wild. "Finally," she says, "something I can stab instead of politely refusing offers." Rael's sword erupts into golden light, cutting the first leaping thing in half midair, fragments sizzling. As each fragment hits warded stone, silver flares, the new network channeling Cairo's containment instinct. Small cages flicker to life automatically, snapping around stray shards before they can recombine fully. Back in the tower, Cairo feels those auto cages form, each one a point of strain he must acknowledge and hold. "Too many," he gasps. "They are splitting deliberately, trying to force me to spread thin across everything." Marin's eyes widen. "Distributed breach," he says. "If you chase each piece, the main pattern may slit free." Cairo thinks of the Echo's lesson in the hall, of awareness, anger, and refusal, and makes a brutal choice. He releases some of the tiny cages, letting less dangerous fragments escape, focusing on the largest mass. In the foundry, a few shards slither away, hissing, but the main body of shadow thickens, towering taller. Lena sees it forming near the central pit, a hulking shape with forearms like cleavers and a spine of blades. "There you are," she says, eyes alight. "Big and stupid. Perfect. Come swing at someone your own enthusiasm." She charges, spear whirling, lightning glyph flaring as she vaults a flow channel with reckless precision. Rael moves opposite, flanking, golden blade cutting low as Lena's spear cuts high, their attacks crossing. The thing roars, sound rattling metal frameworks, claws slamming into hastily reinforced ward lines around pits. Every impact sends a jolt through Cairo. In the Nexus chamber he sways, feeling each hit like a physical blow. He tightens the cage pattern around the foundry, pulling lines inward, forcing the veil-born mass into a box. Bars rise in his mind's eye, intersecting above the creature, walls slamming down around that central knot. With a thunderous crack, the cage manifests in the real world around the monster, silver beams locking. The Veilborn slams against them, claws screaming across light, sparks of fragmented shadow spraying outward. Rael and Lena skid back as the bars descend, catching their breath at the sudden, luminous prison. "Nice timing," Lena pants. "Tell Cage Boy if he drops this, I will personally haunt his next life." Rael smirks. "If he drops this," he says, "none of us will get another life to haunt anything." In the tower, Cairo clings to the pattern, focusing mercilessly on the main creature, ignoring stray shadows. He feels the wards taking some of the load, the network humming in support, Arkle itself lending weight. "Anchor," he whispers. "Awareness," he adds. "Refusal," he finishes, mantra stitching his will into the lines. The monstrous Veilborn howls, body fracturing under the cage's pressure, edges dissolving into black dust. That dust claws at the bars, trying to seep through, but each grain that escapes weakens the central core. Cairo senses the trade, chooses to let a trickle leak rather than risk a catastrophic blowout of the whole cage. Silver bars contract with a final, brutal twist, crushing the remaining mass into a point of writhing dark. In both mind and foundry, the point flashes once, then breaks, dissolving into harmless ash that falls silently. The stray fragments that escaped earlier scatter into nothing, starving without the main mass to anchor them. The wards around the foundry ring dim from blazing to steady, the scream and Cairo's nerves fading to a buzz. He slumps fully to the floor, breathing ragged, the spiral lines under his palms cooling from white to silver. In the foundry, Lena doubles over, laughing breathlessly, spear tip lowering as adrenaline shakes her limbs. "Still alive," she says between gulps of hot air. "Still ours, still very stab-oriented. I call that victory." Rail surveys the slag pits, ward lines, and settling dust, golden sigils easing back into softer glows. "Containment held," he says. "Network bent, but did not break. Arkell owes Cairo another week of sleep." Lena straightens, gaze turning upward toward the distant tower where she knows he fights a different battle. "Sleep first," she says, screaming later. "I will handle the screaming personally if anyone interrupts him." Messengers sprint between foundry and tower, reports flying like sparks as the city absorbs what just happened. Back in the Nexus chamber, Marin kneels beside Cairo, checking his pulse with more worry than formality. "You stayed centered," Marin says softly. "You chose where to lose and where to hold. That mattered." Cairo laughs weakly. "I let small pieces go," he says, "so I could crush the big one. It felt wrong and right." Marin nods slowly. "Strategic surrender," he says. "Unpleasant, necessary. We will refine protocols later." The mark slowly cools from searing to warm, its rhythm settling back into a pace. Cairo can live inside. Through the wards, he feels the city calming, the panic spikes smoothing, the hum returning to steady. He also feels something else, faint and distant, a touch at the edges of the pattern that is not a shove. The vast presence from beyond brushes the network like a hand along a fence, measuring each new post. "There," it whispers without sound. "You bled and refused and held." The cage begins to fit its intended shape. Cairo does not answer this time. His refusal has already spoken through sweat, pain, and deliberate choices. The presence recedes without pushing further, curiosity tempered by acknowledgement, like a nod between rivals. Lena bursts into the chamber moments later, armor scorched, hair sticking to her forehead, eyes blazing. She drops to a knee beside Cairo and pokes his shoulder, not gently, needing the physical reassurance. "Still you," she demands, not replaced by smug cosmic noise. "I hope your jokes better sound familiar." He grins, exhausted. "You missed the part where I nearly redecorated this floor with my breakfast," he says. "Disgusting," she replies, relief flooding her expression. "But very on brand, so I will accept it." Rael arrives behind her, slower but solid, golden sigils dim to embers again after burning so fiercely. "You held," he says, meeting Cairo's eyes with open, unhidden respect now, "and you learned where to bend." "The council will argue about sacrifices and risk ratios," Rael adds. "I will argue that Arkell still stands." Marin pushes to his feet, rubbing his temples. "I will argue that we need more chalk, more sigil ink, and sleep." Lena snorts. "You can have ink," she says. "Sleep is rare currency. We are hoarding it for the next crisis." Cairo leans back against the cool stone, letting the ward hum cradle his frayed nerves like a low lullaby. He understands now that being the cage is not about perfection, but about choosing where to draw each line. Some cracks must be allowed at the edges, so the heart can hold when a real storm slams against it. Outside, Arkell's lights burn late into the night, ward lines gleaming like constellations scribbled on stone. Workers return to the foundry terraces, stepping carefully around fresh scorch marks and faint silver scars. Children will hear stories about the night the slag pits boiled and a cage of light rose above molten ruin. Scholars will argue over diagrams, counselors will bicker, wardens will sharpen blades and double patrols, and Cairo, mark warm and pulse steady, will stand at the center of a city that is learning to sing with him. The war with the gate has not yet reached its loudest chapter, but tonight the wards cried out and survived. Tomorrow, he knows, the pattern will be tested again, harder, stranger, closer to the heart of Arkell itself. Yet as Lena's shoulder presses against his and Rael's shadow falls across them like a shield, he feels ready, not because he is unafraid, but because fear now has shape, and that shape fits inside a cage he chose. Chapter 7. The day the city looked back begins with Arkell. awake long before the bells consider dawn. Fog clings to alleys and rooftops, not thick enough to hide in, just enough to blur edges into unease. Silver ward lines glow faintly along every street, like veins under skin, pulsing with slow, restrained power. Cairo stands in the inner courtyard, cloak thrown over training clothes, eyes ringed with sleepless shadows. The mark under his shirt hums with the wards, steady but sharp, like a blade laid flat against his heart. He has not truly slept since the slag pits, only drifted in shallow dozes full of echoing cages and cracks. Lena paces near the well, spear balanced across her shoulders, boots scuffing circles into damp stone. "You are doing the thing again," she says, staring at nothing like it owes you a very good apology. Cairo forces his gaze away from the ward lines curling along the courtyard wall like lit calligraphy. "Nothing keeps trying to poke holes in the city," he replies. "I think it owes me several apologies, actually." Lena snorts, though the sound carries more tension than humor this morning, and less practiced bravado. "The slag pit story reached the first years," she says. "They think you swallowed a Veilstorm for breakfast." He grimaces. "Did you correct them?" he asks. "Or did you tell them I also bench press reflections at night?" "I told them you bench press paperwork," she answers. It sounded more terrifying and far more realistic. Before he can respond, the tower bell rings twice, short and sharp, the signal for formal council audience. Every soldier in the courtyard straightens, conversations dying, eyes cutting toward the inner keep uneasily. Captain Rail strides from the barracks archway, armor fully polished, golden sigils glowing with restrained heat. Envoy Marin stands beside him, robe immaculate, hair hastily tied, slate already flickering with incoming orders. "Cairo!" "Lena," Rail calls. "With me, the council wishes to see the cage and the spear that refuses to leave it." Lena groans quietly. "Wonderful," she mutters. "Breakfast with ghost mirrors and bureaucrats in fancy robes." Cairo adjusts his jacket, tugging it straight as if fabric could shield him from political dissection. "Do I look sufficiently uncooperative?" he asks. "Or should I scowl harder to match their expectations better?" "You always look uncooperative," Lena says, clapping his back. "Consider it your natural survival expression." They follow Rail and Marin through torchlit corridors lined with tapestries depicting older, simpler battles. Warriors fight beasts of flame and horned giants in thread, no hint of mirrored cages or whispering rivers. Cairo wonders briefly how those heroes would feel about a war fought in reflections and nerve endings instead. They reach the High Council chamber, a tall, domed room where light filters through sigil-stained glass in shards. 6 robed figures sit behind a half-circle of carved stone, faces shadowed, sigil masks obscuring their features. A crystal disc hovers before them, images from scrying mirrors rippling across its surface like restless fish. One image shows the slag pits, another the Hall of First Vows, another the cistern, each layered with silver lines. Rail bows with stiff respect. "As requested," he says, "Containment Bearer Cairo and Spear Specialist Lena report." Cairo bows more shallowly, copying angles he has seen from officers who tolerate council politics out of duty. Lena bows just enough to avoid arrest, and exactly enough to express deep personal skepticism about the room. A voice from the leftmost mask speaks, deep and precise. "You have altered Arkel's wards without our final consent." Marin clears his throat softly before Rail can answer too bluntly for anyone's safety or career longevity. "With respect," Marin says, "we altered them with your provisional consent and the city's immediate necessity." Another counselor leans forward, mask etched in sharp angular sigils that seem to cut the air around them. "The gate tested your new network," she says, "and nearly tore a hole through our industrial district arteries." Rail's jaw tightens. "It nearly tore a hole because it exists," he says, "not because we refuse to stand idle. Containment held," he continues, "because the wards were bound to a living pattern, not to cold carved stone." Several masks tilt slightly toward Cairo, attention settling on him with a weight he feels in his teeth. "You refuse the gate's offer regarding your dead," says the central counselor, voice old and unhurried. "You decline to turn Arkel's grief into an archive beyond the veil, despite the potential reduction of suffering." Lena steps forward before Cairo can craft a diplomatic sentence that still tastes like bile. "We bury our own," she says, voice flat. "We remember them in stories, not in cages owned by something hungry." The central mask does not turn to her, but the silence that follows suggests several counselors want to. "Cairo, the old voice says. Explain your refusal in your own words, not filtered through captain or envoy. Cairo swallows, feeling the mark warm like a small sun pressed against rusted iron bars. It wanted to use my sigil as a door, he says. Turn the cage into a funnel for souls we could not save. It framed it as mercy, he continues, offering safety for pieces of us that would otherwise be lost forever. He looks up, meeting the empty eye slits of the central mask, refusing to flinch under the hidden gaze behind. If I open that door once, he says, even for good reasons, it would never truly be mine again afterward. The cage belongs to Arkel, he adds, to the living who choose, not to a gate that catalogs what it consumes. Murmurs ripple along the stone bench behind the masks, half approval, half alarm, all sharpened interest. One counselor taps fingers on stone, rings glinting beneath his sleeves as his mask tilts toward Marin. The sovereign containment pattern predates our current covenant, he says, yet we never completed it. Now the pattern walks in a trainee, he adds, and we are expected to trust his instincts over centuries. Marin lifts his slate, voice deceptively mild. His instincts kept slag and fire from swallowing half the city. They also prevented the gate from establishing a permanent exchange route for our dying, he continues. A route it would eventually have used in the other direction, he finishes, each word clipped and deliberate. Rael folds his arms over his chest. If the council wishes a different answer, he says, they should stand there. Let the gate make its offer to your ribs instead, he adds, and see how generous your refusal remains. A third counselor speaks, mask etched with horrid sigils that swirl faintly as she leans into the crystal light. Containment bearer, she says, do you understand that your choices now define more than this city alone? You are a focal point in a pattern that touches older packs and broader territories than Arkel's walls. Cairo resists the urge to shrug like a stubborn child. He knows this is bigger than his complaints and fatigue. I understand that if I fail, he says quietly, what breaks will reach beyond your maps and trade routes. But I also understand that if I become the gate's tool, he continues, it will break things faster and quieter. Silence stretches, heavy, broken only by the faint hum of scrying crystals and the far echo of city noise below. At last, the central counselor speaks again, voice still calm, but bearing an undercurrent of reluctant acceptance. Arkel will continue with the Sovereign Network experiment, he says, under stricter oversight and reporting. You will submit personal resonance accounts daily, he continues, through Envoy Marin as designated mediator. You will not open any passages, he finishes, for souls or otherwise, without explicit council authorization. Lena lets out a short, disbelieving laugh that no one requested, and several masks clearly dislike hearing. If the gate offers another bargain, she says, it will not wait while we write nicely worded requests. Rael glances at her, then at the council bench. My unit responds in the moment, he says, or we die together. The boy's refusal saved us once, he adds. I will not hang his judgment on a chain of signatures. The old voice considers, then sighs, sounding every year of its age, and then several centuries more. Protocol bows to survival when necessary, he says, but survival bows to structure when the storm passes. We cannot control the gate, he continues, so we must control ourselves all the more carefully. Cairo nods slowly. I will report what happens, he says, but I will not pause mid-collapse for permission. If that is unacceptable, he adds, you may carve the pattern from my bones and hope it still listens. A sharp inhale echoes from someone behind a mask. The central counselor raises a hand to forestall any outburst. We tried that once, he says quietly. In another age, with another bearer, the pattern died and so did he. The gate celebrated for 30 years, he adds, before we learned how to shackle it again with weaker tools. Cairo's skin prickles. Lena's grip on her spear tightens until her knuckles whiten under the leather wrap. Rael's eyes narrow. That record was never in our archives, he says, voice dangerously soft beneath respect. Some histories were sealed, the old voice admits, not from malice but because fear preferred forgetting. But forgetting allowed the gate to grow bolder, he continues, so we will not repeat that choice now. Marin bows his head. Then we stand on incomplete stones, he says, and hope our additions hold together. The central counselor gestures to the side, where a crystal pedestal rises from the floor near Cairo. A slim circlet of metal rests atop it, inlaid with faint sigils that glimmer like starlight caught on steel. This is an anchor crown, the counselor says, crafted to stabilize high resonance bearers during strain. Old design, recently reforged, he continues. It will help distribute your mental load through ordered channels. Lena eyes it suspiciously. Or it will record every thought he has for the council to dissect later, she mutters. Marin steps forward, examining the circlet with professional interest rather than hungry curiosity. The anchor does not read content, he says, only intensity. It will not show them your actual memories. It will show when the cage buckles, he explains, allowing others to reinforce without guessing blindly. Rail glances at Cairo. Your choice, he says. I recommend using any tool that keeps you alive. With caution, Cairo approaches the pedestal, staring at the circlet, feeling both drawn and repelled by its quiet promise. He imagines wearing it, mark linked to city wards, thoughts thrumming through yet another polished channel. He also imagines refusing it, keeping control entirely his, and collapsing alone when the next strike lands. Lena steps close enough that her shoulder brushes his, voice low enough for only him and maybe Rail to hear. If it tries to bite your mind, she says, I will rip it off and use it as a dinner plate instead. He laughs under his breath, despite the tension strangling the room. You do realize that is not reassuring, he says. It never is, she replies. But you trust me anyway, which is a worrying habit and also helpful. Cairo takes a breath, reaches out, and lifts the anchor crown from its pedestal, metal cool and light in his hands. He slides it onto his head. The sigils flare once, then settle against his temples like cold fingertips. For a heartbeat, he feels dizzy, as if standing on a cliff, looking down at a city built entirely from light. Then the sensation steadies, the mark sinking with the circlet, the wards, the tower, the very bones of Arkel. He feels not just pressure points now, but subtle currents, habits of motion, places where fear pools at dusk. The counselor, watching through the central mask, nods. Resonance stable, he says. No signs of rejection yet. Yet, Lena echoes under her breath, rolling her eyes. I love that word so very much in experiments. Marin records data quickly, but his expression relaxes slightly, tension smoothing from his shoulders. You are not burning, he says to Cairo, which is an excellent opening for any experiment involving your brain. Rail steps between Cairo and the bench, subtly shifting the dynamic back toward command rather than laboratory. If the council has no further demands, he says, my unit will return to preparing for the next veil test. There will be one, he adds. We all feel it, whether or not your scrying crystals admit the truth. The old voice chuckles, dry as paper. Dismissed, he says. For now, Argo leans on you more than we admit. Do not break, he adds. It would upset our carefully drafted spreadsheets and our slightly less careful souls. As they leave the chamber, Lena glances back once, studying the masked figures, the hovering crystal images. They are afraid, she murmurs. They hide it well, but they are terrified this pattern will consume us. Cairo touches the circlet gingerly, feeling the wards hum through it, softer now that he is away from the bench. They are afraid of losing control, he says, of the gate, of the cage, of the idea that something exists outside laws. Welcome to my last 3 years, he adds. Except I had fewer robes and more bruises from training dummies. Rael walks ahead, voice carrying just enough to reach them without echoing down the corridor unnecessarily. They are not wrong to fear, he says, but fear is a terrible architect if you let it draw the only plans. We will design our own, he adds, using your pattern, Marin's numbers, and Lena's unhealthy enthusiasm. Unhealthy, Lena repeats, offended. My enthusiasm is extremely healthy. It just wears sharp shoes. Later, in the high tower nexus, Cairo sits cross-legged inside the spiral, anchor crown cool on his forehead. Lena sprawls on the steps just outside the pattern, polishing her spearhead, humming an off-key camp tune. Marin adjusts crystals, watching how the circlet's faint glow interacts with the ward threads in the air. Tell me what you feel now, he says to Cairo, not just the big pulses, but the small oddities along edges. Cairo lets his eyes close, breathing steady, sinking into the network with slightly more guidance than before. He feels a girl in the lower market laughing too loudly, ward lines vibrating with her nervous excitement. He feels an old man tracing a ward charm on his door, his fingers shaky but careful, respect vibrating gently. He feels 2 wardens bickering on a watchtower, their overlapping frustrations forming a tiny storm in the pattern. He also feels something else, a subtle mirroring along a northern street, as if reflections are breathing deeper. There, he says, frowning. North slope, near the glass blowers. The reflections are thicker than they should be. Marin glances to a secondary crystal, which shows a faint outlined map with silver pulses across it. I see the shift, he says. Slight, not yet a breach, but definitely gate-aligned resonance in that sector. Rael, waiting near the doorway with arms crossed, straightens, golden sigils brightening with interest. We will treat it like a dry run, he says. Move a small unit, test response time, refine our patterns. Lena leaps to her feet, spear swinging into place with the joy of someone invited to hit a problem directly. Cairo stays here, Rael adds. Anchored, we handle the street level while he watches for deeper tricks. Enjoy zoomed perspective, Lena says, winking at Cairo. I will go interview the reflection with my spear. He smiles faintly. Try to be polite to the mirrors, he says. They see more of your scowling than I do. When Rael and Lena leave, the nexus feels briefly too large, the silence echoing in the circular chamber. Marin moves to Cairo's side, close enough to intervene quickly if the anchor crown misbehaves unexpectedly. If this works, Marin says quietly, we will have a real-time response grid built around your awareness. If it fails, he adds, we will learn valuable lessons while picking you back up from the floor again. Your bedside manner is inspiring, Cairo replies, then closes his eyes, focusing on the northern street. He feels Rael's unit moving, boots thudding a path across his inner map, ward lines adjusting around them. He feels the reflections thickening ahead of them, a subtle doubling, like a choir of one gaining extra voices. He also feels something else, a flutter at the very edge of the pattern, not inside Arkle, but watching it. The presence is there, the massive awareness between cages, observing with that same inexhaustible curiosity. It does not push tonight, does not offer bargains, only listens to how they respond, how the cage adapts. Cairo ignores it as best he can, focusing on Rael's path, on Lena's steady spear point moving through his awareness. Turn left at the next arch, Cairo says through the linked crystal, voice echoing faintly in Rael's earpiece. Reflection density spikes there, he explains. You will want space, not a crowded corner, if it manifests. On the street, Rael signals the turn, Lena's boots splashing through a shallow puddle that reflects 3 moons. She glances down, then up at the single real moon overhead, grip tightening as her instincts bristle. 3 moons, she mutters, all wrong sizes. Cairo, your cage needs to yell at the sky for artistic errors. In the nexus, Cairo feels the distortion like a pressure wave rolling toward the archway, compressing air. Incoming, he says sharply. Straight ahead, high aggressive spike, no negotiation flavor this time. The puddles along the street rise, water stretching upward in tall, thin sheets, forming mirrored walls on either side. Within those walls, distorted versions of Rael's squad appear, moving half a heartbeat out of sync with reality. Lena watches her own reflection raise its spear a fraction earlier, eyes gleaming with hollow, malicious delight. Absolutely not, she growls, lunging forward, her real spear cutting through the false image in a crackling line. The mirrored wall shatters where she strikes, fragments falling inward, trying to reform, ward lines flaring in protest. Cairo feels the impact, the shards trying to sync with his pattern, like code attempting to rewrite itself. Mid-script, he clamps down, mark blazing, forcing the network to treat every shard as separate, weak, unanchored anomalies. Do not let them mimic formation, he says. Keep your movements unpredictable, break your own rhythm. Finally, Lena replies through the crystal, grinning despite the tension. My chaotic footwork is official doctrine. The mirrored walls convulse, reflections struggling to track spears and blades that no longer follow clean patterns. Rael's golden sigils ignite, casting spears of light that lance through the false images, disrupting their cohesion. Cairo extends the cage pattern outward, not as full bars yet, but as guiding rails that gently push the anomalies. He nudges each shard toward ward glyphs etched on shop doors, along gutters, across cobbles underfoot. Where shards touch those glyphs, tiny cages spark to life, snapping shut around the fragments with audible pops. The reflections screech, soundless but felt through nerves, as their ability to mimic fractures beyond repair. Within minutes, the walls collapse entirely, water slapping back to the cobbles, puddles now reflecting correctly. Lena plants her spear, breathing hard, then jabs at a harmless puddle just to make sure it stays obedient. Clear, Rael reports, scanning for residual shimmer. No remaining anomalies visible to our less fancy eyes. In the nexus, Cairo exhales, tension draining, the anchor crown cooling against his skin as the strain lifts, the network held without direct physical contact. Marin says, unable to keep off from his usually dry tone. You guided them like pieces on a board, he adds, and the city's own wards snap the trap closed. Cairo opens his eyes, feeling exhaustion settling into the edges of his vision like creeping dusk. Pieces on a board implies control, he says. I felt more like someone frantically catching falling knives. Marin smiles faintly. Successful knife catching, he replies, is how we define strategy in Arkle now. Through the wards, Cairo senses the distant presence withdrawing slightly, filing away observations silently. It has watched a city become a cage that remembers itself, and a bearer choose refusal 3 times. The war is not over, not close, but for the first time it feels like both sides are truly learning each other. Lena's voice crackles back through the crystal link, lighter now that immediate danger has been thinned. Tell the council their crown did not fry you, she says, and that my spear remains extremely useful. Tell them yourself, Cairo answers, smiling, but maybe do not open with complaining about their furniture. Rael's laugh carries faintly through the link, rare and genuine, cutting through the fading tension like clear air. Return to base, he orders. No more hunting tonight. Let the gate chew on this failure for a few hours. As the squad heads back, Cairo removes the anchor crown carefully, feeling its weight leave his temples. His mark continues to hum with the wards, even without the metal's help, slightly more attuned than before. Marin accepts the circlet, studying its flickering sigils, already considering adjustments for the next test. You are adapting, he says. Not just the city, but you. The pattern is learning your limits and your habits. Cairo stretches aching shoulders, feeling every nerve like a separate thread that has been tugged all night. I just hope the gate is not learning faster, he mutters. I am tired of being outperformed by cosmic nonsense. Lena bursts through the Nexus door moments later, hair wild, armor scuffed, grin bright despite exhaustion. She walks straight to Cairo and bumps his forehead gently with hers, checking for lingering strange resonance. Still you, she declares. Still annoying, still breathing, still my favorite disaster, everything in order. He laughs, the sound edged with relief. Still you, he echoes. Still stabbing problems, still ignoring protocol. Rael enters after her, slower, posture straight despite the fatigue radiating from his steps and his eyes. Good work, he says simply, which from him feels like a medal and a shield at the same time. The council will want reports, he adds. They always do. We will give them numbers and outcomes. They do not need to see the line we walk, he continues. Between mercy and refusal, fear and function. Cairo nods, thinking of offers refused, doors kept shut, fragments allowed to dissolve rather than be collected. The cage is nearly finished now. Awareness spread through stone, anchors set in hearts, refusal hardened. Beyond the walls, the gate watches, patient and vast, a storm learning the shape of the city that defies it. Arkle glows under restless stars, ward lines bright, reflections honest, people laughing a little too loudly. Chapter 7 ends not with a final victory, but with a fragile equilibrium, a city in a cage staring back. Tomorrow, the gate will test another angle, another habit of reality, another thread in the web around them. Tomorrow, Cairo will stand again in the spiral, Lena at his side, Rael at his back, Marin drawing lines. For now, as midnight slides over Arkle like ink, the city sleeps inside its own remembered pattern, and the cage, sovereign and stubborn, holds its shape one more night against the endless watching dark. Chapter 8, The Day the Cage. Shook begins with rain falling straight, no wind to carry it sideways. Arkle wakes under a slate sky, ward lines dim but steady, like veins under chilled stone skin. Cairo stands in the Nexus spiral, anchor crown cool on his brow, breath matching the city hum. He has become used to feeling rooftops and alleys in his bones, but today the mat feels heavy. The mark throbs in slow pulses, not alarmed yet, but braced, as if listening for a distant footstep. Lena sits on the lowest stair, tossing a practice knife and catching it without ever looking down. You are doing that stone statue thing again, she says, the one where you forget blinking exists. Cairo huffs a breath that is almost a laugh, eyes still closed, hands resting flat on glowing lines. The city is quiet, he answers. Too quiet in the way instructors use before hitting us with surprises. Envoy Marin adjusts crystals along the wall, ink stains on his fingers, exhaustion carved under his eyes. Quantitatively, Marin says, gate resonance has dropped to the lowest point since first contact weeks. Lena raises an eyebrow, flipping the knife higher, testing gravity like she expects it to misbehave soon. "See," she says. "Even the numbers think something is wrong, so you can stop calling me paranoid now." Cairo frowns, feeling a faint tug near the southern warehouses, then another near the northern towers. "They are not pushes," he murmurs. "More like the pattern coughing, little skips in the background beat." Captain Rail steps through the archway, armor strapped, golden sigils banked low like hidden embers. "Council reports no incidents overnight," he says, and requests a demonstration of controlled stability. Lena snorts loudly, nearly dropping her knife. "They want a show because nothing collapsed for one day," Marin sighs. "Accurate," he admits. "They believe a calm pattern should be proven safe on command again." Rail studies Cairo closely, measuring the tension in his shoulders and the tightness around his mouth. "Can you hold the network while splitting focus?" Rail asks. "Or will their spectacle crack our defenses?" Cairo opens his eyes, anchor crown glinting faintly, pupils still full of ward lines and ghost streets. "I can juggle," he says, "but I would rather juggle knives than do it while someone shakes the floor." Lena smiles thinly. "You juggle knives, I juggle problems," she says. "Between us we have no hobbies." Marin lifts his slate and projects a schematic of Arkel glowing above the spiral like a lantern. "We propose a timed stress test," he explains. "Brief controlled echoes in 3 districts, no full breaches." Rail folds his arms. "If the gate is truly quiet," he says, "it might try to ride any echo we summon here." Cairo feels the mark twist at that, as if agreeing that inviting noise into silence is a dangerous game. "We can refuse if you choose," Marin offers. "I will take the argument back to the council chambers." Cairo shakes his head slowly, fingers tightening on the etched spiral, feeling the stone answer his grip. "No," he says. "If they push for tests, better we choose the terms than wait for them to choose alone." Lena rises, sliding the knife away, spear in hand now, eyes sharpening into the lines of battle awareness. "Then we do it ugly and prepared," she says. "Not pretty and fragile for whatever scrying crystal audience." Rail nods once, decision solidifying. "We run the test," he says, "but on our schedule and with full armor." He sends runners to outer posts, instructions carried down stairwells and across courtyards like sparks. Soon, wardens take positions at key junctions, anchors ready, eyes on water, glass, and polished steel. Children are ushered indoors with stories about boring inspections, parents hiding their shaking hands. Cairo returns to the center of the spiral, closes his eyes, and lets the city unfurl inside his chest again. He feels every ward line, every sigil knot, every alley where fear tends to pool when sirens start singing. "Ready," Marin says, fingers hovering over a crystal that will call up the first controlled reflection echo. "Ready," Rail confirms, sorted aside. Weight balance, voice a steady line drawn through the room. Lena taps her spear butt twice on the floor. "Ready," she adds, and strongly opposed to dying on cue. Cairo draws a long breath and nods. "Begin with the market ring," he says. "Short echo, low intensity first." Marin whispers a trigger phrase, crystal flaring, sending a carefully shaped pulse along the ward network. In Cairo's mind, the market ring brightens, reflections in shop windows thickening, colors sharpening oddly, stall canopies shimmer with double edges, fruit piles seem to glow, cobbles shine like they were just washed. He feels pressure, light like a hand testing fabric, nothing like the weight of true breach. "Contain," he murmurs gently, shaping the cage not to imprison, but to guide echoes into pre-drawn grooves. Silver rails appear in his inner map, lining streets, nudging energy toward empty squares and warded corners. The echo rolls along them obediently, like water following gutters after a controlled rain, then bleeds away. "Market stable," Marin reports, watching numbers dance across his slate in tidy, unpanicked columns. Rael does not relax. "Next," he says, "but keep the intervals short. I do not like the feel of this quiet." Cairo swallows and points mentally toward the river terraces. "Second pulse there," he says, even shorter. The crystal flares again, different sequence, sending a thinner echo skimming across the wards to the water. This time, Cairo feels the river answer before the echo fully arrives, like a sleeper rolling toward a sound. Reflections tighten, surface tension growing, but the new wards blaze bright along the banks and piers. He directs the echo into those lines, the cages responding, crossing above the surface like silver bridges. The river shivers once, then settles, water reflecting lantern light and silhouettes of wardens. "River stable," Marin says, though sweat beads at his temples now, numbers less tidy than a moment earlier. Lena shifts her stance, the skin between her shoulders prickling. One more and we stop, she says firmly. Rael nods. Final test at the old prayer district perimeter, he orders, nowhere near the vow hall itself. Cairo focuses there, feeling the memory of that place like a scar whispering beneath fresh bandages. Light echo only, he says. No shadow component. We are not inviting another conversation with history. Marin obeys, voice low, Crystal singing a note that threads through the ward map toward cracked temples. The echo arrives like a breeze, stirring dust, brightening carvings, calling old sigils to flicker faintly. Cairo guides it carefully, letting it wash over rooftops and alleys, then seep harmlessly into dead stone. For one heartbeat, everything holds. Wards humming, echoes dispersing, Ark held balanced on the edge of calm. Then the mark seizes like a muscle cramp in his soul, pain stabbing sharp enough to rip a gasp from him. The hum of the network jumps, lines snapping taut, resonance spiking in places Marin did not target at all. Something else is riding the pattern, Cairo chokes, fingers digging into the spiral until nails scrape stone. Marin's eyes fly wide as his slate floods with red glyphs, districts lighting up with sudden distortion. Council interference, he breathes, horrified. Their observation array injected feedback into the test. Rael's face goes hard as hammered steel. Where? He snaps. Tell me where the worst spike is forming now. Cairo fights through the pain, searching the map, feeling the ward scream like plucked nerves on raw bone. The city flares in his mind, dozens of minor flutters, but one place blazes. A wound ripping open too fast. Central Plaza, he gasps, right under the main scrying spire, where everyone chose to feel safe today. Lena swears viciously. Of course, she snarls, already moving, spear in hand, fury sharp enough to cut air. Rael signals wardens, orders hitting the corridors like thunder, boots answering with immediate echoes. Cairo stays anchored, Rael says, voice like command magic. We move, we hold, he closes whatever opens. Cairo clings to the spiral, world narrowing to the roaring point above the Central Plaza, vision swimming. Through the wards he feels crowds, merchants, council aides, children chasing birds, all unaware of the spike. Above them, the main scrying spire crackles with excess energy, crystals overloaded by eager remote eyes. The gate presses against that sudden weak spot, sensing not stone, but a tunnel of attention aimed outward. Reflections in polished tiles and fountain water darken, shapes twitching at the corners before locking still. Lena and Rael burst into the plaza as the sky overhead bends, colors smearing, edges softening unnaturally. People freeze at the sight, fear rippling through the crowd like a wind that arrives before any sound does. Move away from water and glass, Rael bellows, voice slicing through panic. Wardens, clear the center ring. Lena leaps onto the fountain rim, spear flashing as she pivots, eyes raking every reflective surface in reach. Hey, she shouts at the nearest cluster of citizens. You can scream later, but feet move first, understand? In the tower, Cairo draws the cage pattern around the plaza, bars seeding through streets and walls. He tries to close them before anything fully steps through, but the pressure is already surging, unstoppable. It is coming anyway, he snarls, like a flood through a door someone kicked open behind my back. Silver erupts in his mind, and in the real plaza simultaneously, ribs of light rising from cobbles and walls. They meet overhead, forming a dome around the spire and fountain, capturing the space that is already warping. Inside that dome, reflections peel away from surfaces, dripping upward, gathering into a central, cruel knot. The crowd outside sees only flashes, warped silhouettes, wardens dragging them back behind warded lines. Inside, Rael and Lena stand with a handful of squad leaders, cut off under a sky made of twisting glass. Lock it down, Rael calls into the crystal clipped to his armor, trusting Cairo can hear through the noise. Cairo hears, but barely. The network shrieks as the knot forms, mirrors showing cages and eyes. The presence here is not a fragment, not a simple veil-born beast. It is a focused shard of the vast listener. You shook the cage, it says inside his skull, voice both near and impossibly distant at the same time. You called and called, it continues, pattern on pattern, and now you flinch when we answer your song. Lena feels the pressure differently, as a ringing behind her teeth and a weight dragging at her lungs slowly. She plants her spear and snarls at the twisting knot. We did not invite you, she says. We lit warnings. The knot shivers, facets tilting, images inside it showing Lena falling, Rael bleeding, Cairo breaking apart. Cairo grits his teeth, refusing those pictures, forcing his own images into the cage pattern instead. He imagines Rael standing, Lena laughing, Arkel streets busy and ordinary, reflections boring and honest. The bars respond to his intent, flickering, struggling to decide which vision will define their geometry now. Awareness, he whispers, voice shaking. Anchor, he gasps. Refusal, he growls, every word a nailed plank. He feels Arkel answer, thousands of unaware hearts beating, thousands of small refusals stacked into one. People choose to stay, to hold, to grip each other's hands instead of running for the hills with their fear. That choice echoes through the wards, feeding the cage, strengthening the bars beyond his single will alone. The knot feels it too, its reflections flicker, some showing not collapse but stubborn, infuriating survival. You are learning, the voice says, not angry, not pleased. The cage hums louder when people breathe inside. Rael takes a step toward the knot, sword raised, golden sigils blazing bright. They turn his armor to sunrise. If you break through, he tells the thing, you find me first, then spear, then the walls you built. Lena steps at his side, spearhead crackling as she channels every scrap of training and rage into her stance. We are not your archive, she says, eyes locked on the shimmering wrongness. We are your barricade tonight. Cairo channels their words into the pattern, letting them become anchors as solid as the stone foundations. He tightens the dome, bars bending inward, not to crush exactly, but to shrink the space the knot can occupy. The pressure spikes, pain flaring white along his spine, the anchor crown burning cold against his temples. For a terrifying heartbeat, he hears nothing, sees nothing, exists only as strains stretch between cages. Then the network surges around him, like a wave that realized the shore will not move and chooses to break. Silver bars slam fully shut, the dome compressing. In the plaza, light blazes, forcing eyes closed in reflex. Inside, Rael and Lena hear a sound like glass singing and stone exhaling, then the knot implodes inward. Reflections collapse, snapping back into their proper places. Water becomes only water. Tiles, only tile again. The dome fades, leaving scorch patterns of faint silver on cobbles and hair standing on everyone's arms. Cairo collapses forward onto the spiral, catching himself on shaking hands, lungs dragging in ragged air. Marin is there instantly, one hand on Cairo's back, watching crystals stabilize from flicker to steady glow. Containment reestablished, Marin says, voice thin. Central plaza sealed, external pressure receding now. Outside, the crowd stares in stunned silence, only breaking when Lena hops down from the fountain and whoops. We are not dead, she yells, grinning fiercely, which means you all owe the cage boy dinner for a month. Rael almost smiles, then remembers protocol and settles for clapping a nearby warden on the shoulder firmly. Clear the plaza in shifts, he orders. Check every reflection twice, then let people curse us in private. Later, when the plaza is empty and the scrying spire hums at a safer resonance, Rael looks up. High above, council silhouettes move behind crystal panels, smaller than they have appeared to him before. He knows they saw everything, every tremor, every near break, every choice made without their scripted timing. In the nexus, Cairo lies on his back in the spiral, eyes closed, chest rising and falling like he ran hours. Lena sits beside him, legs stretched out, anchor crown in her hands, inspecting it like a suspicious weapon. This thing held, she says grudgingly. No scorch marks on your brain, no extra voices in your jokes yet. Cairo manages a weak laugh. Plenty of voices, he says, but most of them already lived in my nerves anyway. Marin rubs his face, ink smeared further. Council feedback nearly shattered the test, he says, still angry. Rael stands in the doorway, armor streaked with faint dust where the dome's light brushed past him earlier. They will demand explanations, he says. We will give them one word and let them chew on it a while. He meets Cairo's gaze, then Lena's, then Marin's. Refusal, Rael says. We refuse to let them design ruin. The mark warms in Cairo's chest at that, the words settling into the pattern like the last stroke of a seal. Outside, thunder grumbles over Arkel, distant but clearer, like laughter or warning, hard to tell which. Chapter 8 ends with a city that just stared into the cage with the gate and did not look away first this time. The war is not won, but tonight the battlefield shifted and Arkel did not break when the cage shook. Chapter 9. The gate remembers the first promise. Begins with Dawn refusing to look gentle today at all, like claws over Arkel's walls in hard lines, catching ward sigils and anchor-crowned metal with precision. Cairo stands on the high tower balcony, cloak snapping, mark humming, eyes gritty from almost no sleep. The city below glows faintly with silver threads, the sovereign network awake and restless under stone. Every rooftop, alley, and window feels like part of a single taut muscle waiting to flinch or strike. Lena leans beside him, elbow on the railing, spear hooked casually, mouth tight with unsaid worry. "You are vibrating," she says, "either from terror or council-grade caffeine. I support both equally." Cairo smirks weakly. "The gate tried to walk into our central plaza yesterday," he says. "Vibrating is polite." "It is not walking," Lena replies. "It is tripping over cages you keep slamming in its smug reflected face." Bootsteps ring behind them. Captain Rael approaches with the steady weight of someone who expects trouble. Golden sigils hover low at his chest, bright enough to light his eyes, dim enough to conserve power. Envoy Marin walks at his side, slate already glowing, hair a defeated nest, expression sharpened by urgency. "They called an emergency session," Marin says. "But this time, they did not ask for you in their chamber." Lena squints. "Skipping the part where they blame us first," she says. "That feels suspicious and lazy." Rail stops at the railing, gaze fixed on the distant canyon where the Eidolon Gate sits like a wound. "The council wants us at the outer observation bastion," he says. Their scrying arrays show a shift. Cairo follows his gaze. Even from here, the horizon looks wrong, air bending above the canyon edge. The mark clenches beneath his ribs, not burning yet, only tightening like a fist that sees a familiar enemy. "Shift how?" Cairo asks, voice already bracing for an answer that will ruin any hope of a simple morning. Marin lifts his slate, projected above it. A shimmering image shows the canyon rim wrapped in pale lines. "The gate is closing its peripheral fractures," he says, concentrating pressure into a single central axis. "That sounds good," Lena says hopefully. "Fewer holes, less screaming, more breakfast for everyone." "Unless," Marin adds dryly, "it is preparing to test one large threshold instead of many tiny experiments." Rael nods once, acceptance settling over him like armor sliding into place. "If the gate focuses," he says, "it will either break something big or accept a boundary it cannot ignore." Cairo feels the network humming in agreement, wards trembling with anticipation, fear, and stubborn pride. "Council wants us at the bastion," Rael repeats. "Because today is not about one street or one cistern. This is about the original line," he says, "the first promised by the canyon and the last one if we fail." Lena straightens, spear across her back now, a banner made of steel and temper. "Then we go," she says. "We stand on that line and remind the gate why it hates Arkle's spine." They descend the tower, corridors buzzing with contained panic, wardens tightening straps and grips. The sovereign wards tremble along the walls, pulses sinking faster with Cairo's racing heartbeat. He feels the mark respond to every touch of his shoulder against stone, every bootstep on sigil-carved floors. At the outer gates, squads stand ready, shields bright, faces pale but resolute, jokes quieter than usual. Rael lifts his hand. "Bastion team only," he orders. "No full march. We are not leaving Arkle naked." The chosen unit forms quickly, veterans and third years interspersed, Lena and Cairo at Rael's side. Marin joins them, slate tucked away now, carrying a smaller crystal that hums like a caged thunderclap. The canyon road stretches outward, wind tearing at cloaks, dust swirling like restless, grounded echoes. As they walk, the gate's presence grows, not as pressure yet, but as a constant awareness in their bones. Cairo feels the sovereign network trailing behind him, each ward line like a thread dragging from his ribs. He touches the anchor crown looping at his belt, not yet on his head, already heavy with potential strain. Lena catches the gesture. "You put that on when we stop," she says, "not while stumbling over rocks." "I am not stumbling," Cairo replies, then merely slips on loose gravel and yanks himself upright quickly. "See?" Lena says, flawless grace as always. "Good thing the universe needs your brain, not your ankles." The bastion looms ahead, carved from the canyon rim itself, its walls etched in overlapping layers of ward lines. Old sigils burn faintly beneath newer sovereign patterns. History and improvisation welded together crudely. Council envoys, warden captains, and a handful of robed scrying adepts already crowd the main parapet. Crystal arrays arc overhead, their facets aimed toward the swirling darkness boiling above the canyon abyss. Everyone turns as Rael's team ascends the final stairs, faces reflecting equal parts hope and dread. The central counselor stands near the edge, mask off for once, his lined face etched with stark honesty. His eyes are tired, but clear silver traces of old ward sigils visible at his temples like faded scars. "Containment bearer," he says, voice quieter out here against the endless wind. "Thank you for coming." Cairo nods, surprised by the lack of ceremony, the absence of veiled reprimand or scripted flattery. "We have never seen the gate move like this," the counselor continues, gesturing toward the canyon. Cairo steps to the parapet and looks, the sight stealing his breath more than the cold wind ever could. The Eidolon Gate is no simple doorway. It is a vast vertical fracture stretching from unseen depths to sky. Today, its edges curl inward, threads of dark and light tightening like a wound trying to scab over badly. Around it, ghost cages hang in the air, faint rings of light, echoes of the ancient structure he saw in dreams. They hum, shiver, some cracking at the edges, some brightening, all reacting as if the gate is changing its rules. The presence he has felt in fragments stands fully here, a storm of awareness focused on one bleeding point. "You brought your city to the edge," it says, not aloud, but hammering through his mark in the bastion wards. "You rebuilt a cage we half abandoned," it continues. "You refused our archives and ignored easier endings." Lena steps close to Cairo, shoulder brushing his, spear grounded but ready, eyes locked on the gate. "Is it monologuing?" she asks. "Because I left my patience for cosmic speeches back in the Citadel." Cairo swallows, forcing his voice steady. "What do you want?" he asks the gate, or the thing behind it. "We want consistency," the presence replies, tone almost weary. "Your world shifts, cracks, forgets patterns. Our cages hold what others discard," it says. "You have built a cage that refuses both forgetting and storage." Marin grips the parapet, knuckles white. "It is analyzing us," he mutters, "not invading, not yet, just gauging." Rael's golden sigils flare in response, ready for violence if analysis turns to action even for one heartbeat. The first builders promised containment, the presence says, then died, then their heirs broke their tools. "You stand where they stood," it adds, with a pattern that hums almost correctly again. Cairo's heart slams against his ribs, the mark burning hot, the sovereign network behind him vibrating. "You mean the Hall of First Vows," he says. "The cages in the void, the echo we spoke to under the city." "We remember every hand that touched a bar there," it replies. "Every promise spoken or abandoned." The gate shifts. The central fracture widens, then narrows, as if breathing in and out without air. Ward lines along the canyon rim flare dangerously. Some old sigils spark, not meant for this kind of strain. Council scribes shout adjustments. Crystals realign, wardens brace. The bastion, a rigid jaw around a scream. The old counselor turns to Cairo, fear poorly hidden now. "Can you extend the sovereign cage here?" he asks. "Can you wrap the gate's edge?" he says. "Like you have wrapped Arkel without tearing yourself apart," Lena gapes. "You want him to cage that?" she says, pointing at the churning fracture. "It barely fits in the sky." Marin inhales sharply. "The hall echo implied the sovereign pattern was designed for this threshold," he says. "It also implied that pushing a bearer too far would kill him and collapse the binding entirely," he adds. Rael steps between Cairo and the counselor, posture protective, in a way that tolerates no polite argument. "We do not throw him into the gate like a stone," Rael says. "Not unless every other line has already snapped." The presence ripples again, the sound in Cairo's bones like distant bells inside a cavern of metal. "You misunderstand scale," it says. "The cage is not meant to wrap the gate's whole depth. It is meant to define the boundary where your world ends," it continues, "and ours begins again." Cairo closes his eyes briefly, sensing the wards behind him, the city's humming pattern clinging to his spine. He pictures Arkel, streets and rooftops, the sovereign lines threading through homes, wells, towers. The network is no longer just a spell. It is a habit, a shared rhythm, a city choosing not to fracture easily. "What happens," he asks, "if we complete the pattern here? What changes for you and for us?" The gate's fracture flares, a column of shifting darkness and light, its voice heavy with an almost nostalgic weight. "We stop testing your perimeter in small ways," it says, "because the contract becomes clear again. Our side agrees to fixed thresholds," it continues. "No more mirrored rivers or stolen moon reflections. Your side agrees not to dig new doors in panic," it finishes. "No more desperate tunnels through dying minds," Lena whispers. "It wants a truce, not peace, a set of rules for future screaming matches." Marin nods slowly, eyes glued to the gate. A boundary agreement, he says, with enforcement on both ends. Rael looks at Cairo, at the anchor crown hanging at his belt, at the strain lines in his face and stance. You do not owe them anything, Rael says quietly. You can walk away and we keep fighting street by street. Cairo thinks of the cistern, the slag pits, the central plaza, of small victories and near disasters. He thinks of refusing easy bargains, of losing some pieces to save the whole pattern, of the cost already paid. I do not owe them, he agrees, but I owe Arkel every possible structure that keeps it breathing. Lena grabs his sleeve. If you do this, she says, you do it with us anchored to your ribs, not alone. Obviously, he says, trying to smile. I would never risk this without my personal spear-shaped threat present. Marin steps forward, holding out the humming crystal he carried, its surface swirling with captured resonance. This can help channel the network, he says. It will buffer some of the load, but not all of it. You may still break, he warns, but the odds of catastrophic failure drop from certain to only horrifying. Cairo takes the crystal, feeling the sovereign pattern inside it like a compressed echo of Arkel's heartbeat. He slides the anchor crown onto his head, sigils flare, linking bracer, mark, crown, crystal, and ward lines. The world narrows to a web of silver threads and one gaping wound at its edge, demanding precise stitches. Stay with me, Lena murmurs, stepping to his right, spear in hand, free hand resting lightly on his arm. Always, Rael adds, standing to his left, golden sigils rising, ready to cut anything that crosses badly. Marin positions himself behind Cairo, crystal raised, ready to absorb or redirect as the pattern demands. The old counselor, mask dangling at his side, watches with the reverence of a man standing at his own grave. Cairo closes his eyes and reaches, not outward first, but inward, into the hall, the cistern, the sagging prayers. He finds the memory of the vow echo, of cages humming in the void, of the phrase sovereign containment. He threads that memory through his mark, into the anchor crown, into the crystal, into the city wards behind him. Arkel answers like a chorus, ward lines flaring, people pausing mid-motion, hearts stuttering, then aligning. The sovereign cage pattern rises in his mind, not as a single sphere, but as a layered shell around the canyon rim. He speaks the word that has become his oath and his burden, voice steady despite the fear clawing his throat. Contain, Cairo says, and the world moves in answer, slower and faster than breath. Vast and intricate, silver lines erupt along the canyon edges, racing like lightning poured into carved grooves in old ward scars. They weave together above the abyss, forming rings that echo the distant cages he has seen between worlds. The gate bucks against the forming boundary, pressure slamming into the new bars hard enough to crack stone. Pain explodes behind Cairo's eyes. His knees buckle, but Rael's hand clamps on his shoulder, holding him upright. Lena shifts closer, shoulder under his, supporting weight with stubborn, furious gentleness. Do not fall, she growls. We are too close to the dramatic part to let you faint in the middle. The presence roars inside his skull. Not anger exactly, more like a storm complaining about new mountains. You draw our architecture, it says, from echoes and scars and dare to wield it without permission. That is what sovereign means, Cairo bites out. The cage is ours, built by our choices, not your convenience. Behind him, Arkel's ward lines blaze white, every sigil, every loop, every carved circle humming in unison. He feels people lifting their eyes toward the canyon, some in fear, some in defiance, all adding weight. The rings above the gate stabilize, humming at a pitch that rattles teeth and stones, aligning with his mark. The fracture pushes, testing every joint, every intersection, searching for flaws in the newly drawn boundary. Small cracks appear in the cage pattern, but each time, threads of power rush from the city to fill them. Marin redirects surges, sweat pouring down his face, throat raw from shouted adjustments to secondary anchors. Rael's sigils flare brighter, his presence a golden spike driven into the pattern every time it threatens to slip. Lena's voice stays in Cairo's ear, a constant low stream of insults, promises, and half-ridiculous threats. If you die, she says, I will drag you back by the cage and yell until you apologize to the whole city. I am very motivated to avoid that scenario, Cairo grinds out, fighting to keep bars from shattering inward. The presence feels the refusal, feels the shared anchor and awareness, and pauses for a fraction of eternity. Incomplete no longer, it says. tone shifting from testing to something like resigned respect. The first promise is rewritten, it continues, not as theirs, not as ours, but as a line between. The gate's pressure shifts. Instead of pushing everywhere at once, it settles into the new rings like water. The fracture still churns, still shows glimpses of impossible skies and spiraled cages, but no longer spills outward. The sovereign pattern locks, bars flaring one final time before dimming to a sustainable, steady glow. Cairo feels the strain snap from unbearable to merely excruciating, then slowly down to something survivable. He drops to one knee, gasping, hands pressed to the bastion stone. Mark burning but no longer flaring wild. The anchor crown cools against his temples. The crystal in his hand dims, its swirl calming into a soft glow. Behind him, Arkel's wards settle, the city exhaling as streets remember ordinary sounds and movements. The presence retreats. Not fully, but beyond the new rings, its awareness still vast, but bounded clearly. We will still watch, it says, fading. We will still ask, we will still hunger, but we respect the cage. And you, it adds, quieter, directed at Cairo alone. We remember you as builder's heir and stubborn lock. Lena collapses to a sit beside him, laughing breathlessly, wiping rain and sweat from her eyes with a wrist. You did it, she says, voice hoarse. You actually put a collar on that horrible sky wound. Rail remains standing, sword tip planted in the stone, golden sigils dimming from blinding to gentle. Containment stable, he says softly, more to himself than anyone else. Boundary confirmed and enforced. Marin staggers to the parapet, looking out at the gate, expression a blend of awe, exhaustion, and relief. Readings show fixed thresholds, he says. No more random reflections, no more stray probes under our skin. The old counselor steps closer, eyes wet, hands shaking slightly as he grips the bastion wall. We bound the gate once with borrowed power, he murmurs. You have bound it again with your own. We will rewrite the covenant, he tells Cairo, with sovereign containment at its center, not as a footnote. Cairo manages a tired grin. Make sure you include naps in that covenant, he says, voice rough and weary. Lena snorts. And mandatory spear appreciation days, she adds. Do not forget the important cultural clauses. Rail actually laughs, a short, genuine sound that seems to loosen everyone's shoulders at once. We return to Arkel, he says slowly, carefully, like people who survive something without collapsing. As they make their way back along the canyon road, the gate looms behind them, still vast, still terrifying. Yet now it hums against silver rings that answer to the city, not to distant, forgotten gods or old mistakes. Cairo can feel it at his back, a constant presence, but no longer clawing at his ribs with every breath. The sovereign network stretches between bastion and tower, a completed loop woven through daily life. Children will still splash in river water, merchants will still polish glass, wardens will still patrol at dusk. Reflections will now show what stands before them, not what waits beyond, unless the cage itself calls. Back inside Arkel, bells ring not in alarm, but in something like astonished, shaky celebration. People spill into streets, looking confused, laughing too loud, crying as if surprised to still have tear ducts. Rumors race ahead of Rail's unit, each more exaggerated than the last, each painting Cairo taller and stranger. By the time they reach the inner gate, some swear he stood taller than the gate, others that he punched it. Lena hears a child whisper. He told the sky to sit and nearly collapses laughing against a pillar. He did not punch anything, she tells the nearest cluster of listeners. He just refused very aggressively. Healers swarm them, fussing, poking, pressing potions into hands, scolding Rael for letting them almost die. Marin disappears under a wave of scribes demanding numbers, forcing him to snatch his slate back repeatedly. The council sends a formal delegation, but the old counselor arrives first, without mask, without ceremony. He clasps Cairo's forearm in a soldier's grip, surprising everyone, including himself. On behalf of Arkel, he says, thank you for refusing us when it mattered and obeying when it counted. Cairo blinks. I will frame that sentence in my bunk, he replies, and point at it during the next argument. That night, the high tower nexus glows softly as Cairo sits in the spiral without the anchor crown on. The mark still hums with the city in the canyon, but the constant sharp ache has faded to a low ache. Lena lies on the stair with her hands behind her head, staring at the ceiling, spear propped nearby. How does it feel? She asks. Being the lock on a door everyone is too smart to open anymore. Cairo considers, fingers tracing the sigils under his palm, listening to Arkel breathe through the wards. Heavy, he says, but less lonely now, like I am part of a wall instead of a rock thrown at it. Marin sits against a pillar, eyes half closed, slate dim for once, voice soft with rare, unguarded satisfaction. The sovereign cage is complete here, he says, but not finished, because you are alive and still choosing. That is how it should be, he adds. A living pattern, not a monument that forgets why it was carved. Rails stands in the doorway, arms folded, gaze on the city lights shining through the window arches. Tomorrow, Rael says, we train again, we drill, we patch holes, we argue about schedules and rations. We go back to routine, he continues, because routine is how civilizations survive their own legends. Lena grins. And you, she tells Cairo, will block properly or I will personally throw you at the gate next time. He laughs, full and unbroken, the sound surprising all of them with how normal it feels after so much strain. The mark warms, not flaring, just settling into a rhythm that feels like his own heartbeat finally leading. Far beyond sight, in the space between worlds, cages hum, acknowledging a new ring added to their choir. The vast presence listens, curious still, but bound now by a promise renewed in mortal blood and stubbornness. It turns its attention elsewhere for a time, leaving Arkel to its small squabbles, joys, and daily defiance. Under the Finnish network, the city sleeps more deeply than it has in weeks, dreams less crowded by shadows. Cairo sleeps too, eventually. And this time his dreams are filled with streets and friends, not endless cages. He knows the gate will test the boundaries again someday, in years or generations, as habits always do. But the pattern will remember, the city will remember, and the sovereign cage will teach new bearers the lines. For now, the war quiets to a watchful truce, a line bright and sharp as a spear point drawn around Arkel. The boy once labeled faulted sigil lies in his bunk, hand on the faint glow over his heart, and smiles tiredly, because the cage is not a prison now. It is a promise chosen, guarded, and shared, held by many instead of one.